the only official podcast of the dead. This is Whacked Out Wrestling. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Whacked Out Wrestling this week. And we have a special one because in all the hustle and bustle of our Thursday show, we completely forgot to mention one of the bigger news stories from Thursday, and that is rest in peace to Dirty Dick Slater. Slater, of course, a huge star in Georgia Championship Wrestling and the NWA, as well as a brief run in WWF. He was 67. But that one ties into...
Also spent some very quality W's. You forgot his WCW time both as a member of messed up tag teams out there, the Hardliners Collection Agency.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It is weird because NWA and WCW always blur their lines together from the late 80s and the early 90s to the point where it's hard to know where the NWA begins and WCW begins. And he had good runs in both eras, so...
Yeah, okay. Anyway, hello, it's me again, Andrew McHale. I'm here with SK Greene. We got a special guest from over at Cageside Seats and the Connoisseurs of Wrestling, Biff Kensington, joining us. Biff, thank you so much for joining Whacked Out Wrestling.
Not a thing. How are y'all tonight?
Mm-hmm. That's good, and actually it was a good choice on this one because... You see, he's a good example of what this goes for. As we needed someone who's a good historian to show the benefit of the Afterlife Wrestling Federation, and we needed someone who both knew the history and knew fantasy booking pretty well to show how this goes. And we remind people a few different things on this one. First off, this is non-religious or non-moral judgments. People like Chris Benoit, Jimmy Snuka, Jimmy Savile, Fabulous Moolah would have just as much of a chance of entering this one as people who would probably go to heaven. There is also no viewpoint of any religion that's being benefited by this, and we don't believe that any religion is benefited for this. Although the Church of the Subgenius is totally the one true faith.
Hail Discordia!
Mm-hmm.
The only requirement here is that you are dead and you had something to do with on this roster. For this one, Greene and I basically looked at a long list of dead wrestlers, depressingly long list of dead wrestlers, and wondered what the top federation would look like. We did a full roster split and a quote-unquote developmental roster. So there's an NXT equivalent, a Raw equivalent, a SmackDown equivalent. And because there's a lot of people out there, we have this all kept on a spreadsheet online. Biff, you're looking it over right now. How crazy is it, huh?
Well, let me put it to you this way. If I was trying to book a fantasy promotion and had this pool of talent, I would be simultaneously ecstatic and completely lost as to where to even begin. It's like, I'm trying to imagine what George Hackenschmidt and Junkyard Dog would be able to do together.
More than likely grabbing cakes.
Yeah, there you go. And I would love to compare notes on, a Jack Briscoe match followed shortly after by a Bruno Sammartino match, just to compare the two different styles. So yeah. It's definitely an interesting little concept here.
Yeah, and that's really the...
I'm just adding in the champions list so that you can get update on that, see where we stand at this point.
Yeah.
Did I mention we thought about this way too much?
Yes. That's one of the things that happens as pro wrestlers die often. It ends up getting more and more time to think about it. It goes basically from a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the people who would barely be part of wrestling on this one, and that would be the obscure pro wrestlers, the trainees who ended up dying in wrestling training, even some fans who presumably would be able to start wrestling in the afterlife, all the way to 10 who are the no doubt about it. These guys would be these candidates for Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, the levels. And basically, on
Just
average,
remember, folks, in the afterlife, there is a place where there are about a zillion low-level indies out there. Everybody has a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And since it's the eternity, there's the chance that everybody from, say, Andre the Giant down to the random trainee will probably get a chance to hold the title aloft. So it's basically what the IWC wants for everybody in WWE right now.
But
mm-hmm. And so
all right, Tommy, which brand should we start with here?
Let me get the thing up, and we have it. It could go to the Raw, SmackDown, and I'm trying to see the NXT roster as well because. Yep. Okay. Let's go with NXT since it's the lowest level of people for it. So.
Right. The big story in NXT right now, I can tell you, is the recently developed 3-on-3 war, and I do mean recently because the heels just added that. Basically, Bam Bam Bigelow has been trying to defend the NXT title against Dirty Dick Murdoch. And at the last NXT show, Adrian Adonis and Dick Slater led a 3-on-1 attack. And who comes for the save but Mike Awesome and Chris Candido? We've got the triple threat against the Hardliners as your top feud in NXT. And wouldn't that be something? That's a 6-man tag I'd look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be something else, especially given, talking about Mike Awesome, who was kind of underappreciated in his era. I don't think we fully appreciated him compared to someone like a Rob Van Dam in ECW, but Awesome and Murdoch, that would be quite an interesting pairing. Just the dichotomy of styles there, that would be something else. And Bam Bam Bigelow, one of the most underappreciated big men in the history of the business. So.
Yeah, and that's really the one weakness where you can almost say that Chris Candido might be the weakest link on that one because you've got 3 great barroom brawlers in Dick Murdoch, Adrian Adonis, and now Dick Slater on that one. And you've got 2 great pets, hot power guys who could also fly like cruiserweights and Bam Bam Bigelow and Mike Awesome. And then you have Chris Candido, who was basically a pure junior heavyweight. Heck, personally, I'm surprised they just didn't go with Chris Candido and Crash Holly as the tag team act there because those guys were very similar on it.
Yeah, they were. Basically, at first, the first few months of the organization, they try to stick with people you teamed with in life. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot. So, for example, you see the Dynamic Duo is in here. You see Public Enemy is in here. You see Los Villanos also in here. A pretty decent tag team division, led by the champs right now, Professor Tanaka and Mr. Fuji.
Yeah, and that's one of the things on it where tag team wrestling is usually pretty rare in this form, simply because it's very rare you have both members of a tag team that both died have died for it, unless they're really classic tag teams. Like you have both members of the Public Enemy have gone through. But you also have things like John Cronus and Anthony Durante teaming up while they're waiting for their Eliminators and Pitbull's partner to join with them.
Right. It's an interesting dichotomy. And speaking of tag teams, a brand new tag team was just added after Dino Bravo lost a tag team loser leaves town match, left John Tena without a partner until he called on his fellow Vancouver great Don Leo Jonathan. Well, there's a team that's going to leave a few bruises, huh?
Yeah, and that's going to be very interesting on it because Tenta was a very underappreciated performer in his day who probably had this potential to do a bit more, while Don Leo Jonathan was one of the most high-flying guys of the 50s and 60s for his size.
Yeah, Don Leo Jonathan was one of the classic monster heels of his era. I mean, he had quite a few sellouts with Bruno Sammartino at the Garden. And John Tenta, like you said, very underappreciated for what he could do. Of all of the big monster heels that Hulk Hogan faced in his WWF run, I think John Tenta was one of the most agile in the ring. He definitely gave Hogan some of his better matches in the early 90s, and was very underappreciated as a tag team worker with Typhoon Fred Ottman as well as part of the Natural Disasters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would be.
And then, of course, he had that time in WCW as the Avalanche. We're not going to mention the rest of it, but as the Avalanche, he joined up some, had good matches with Sting and with Big Bubba Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
Also had a pairing as I get heavies in the Dungeon of Doom story against Hogan, even though that story was a train wreck at every level.
Yeah, but that was really the case with Tenta's career, where he's one of the best examples of how much booking can handle someone, because he was amazing. He was a very good monster heel at his time when he was booked strongly, but he hit the wall when the booking was gone.
Right. Now, since most of you people who are listening can't actually see the roster that we have, let me go over it for NXT. Your main event, on the face side, led by Bam Bam Bigelow, NXT champion. The top heels at this point are Dick Murdoch and Dory Funk Sr. Any thoughts on people you think are kind of although we've talked about Murdoch and Bigelow, let's talk about about Dory Funk Sr., who for too many people is better known as just being the father to Dory and Terry Funk, who, of course, are scheduled to join this federation as soon as they retire, which will be in the next 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
But he was an incredible talent, a very smart talent in his own right, really helped Texas become a hotbed for wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dory Funk Sr., you have to understand when you're talking about the Funks, Dory Jr. and Terry wouldn't have gotten nearly as far as they did without their father's leadership. I mean, he was absolutely a KG veteran of the business in his own right, had a lot of respect in the business, and taught his sons what they knew. It's the classic second generation case with Dory and Terry, taking the lessons from their father and kind of taking it all over the world. Dory Funk Sr., one of the best of his era, and definitely one of the best to come out of Texas in the 1940s and 50s.
Yeah, and that's really the benefit for things like that, because you were pretty much guaranteed more top second generation performers in the territory era, because the second generation performers were probably working for their parent, who would teach them everything they knew and would make it clear, you're going to continue my legacy. Whereas in the modern era, where there's more second generation performers, you don't have that immediacy and that guaranteed connection you do today for it.
Yeah, although you can still see second generation guys who are coming through the system. Like I can tell you, MLW, I'm very excited about Brian Pillman Jr. right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it also helps with that one, because Pillman Jr. seems to know the benefits of Pillman Sr.'s career, both warts and all, and knew that it wasn't just about him being a good worker or being a loose cannon, but also he was willing to get goofy as well.
Oh yeah. So that's the top draws at the NXT style. The upper mid card here, on the face side, we have George the Animal Steel, Mike Awesome, and High Chief Peter Maivia. On the heel side, you have Big John Studd and Nikolai Volkov. And of this, let's focus on Peter Maivia, because he's sort of the one that got lost in the modern era. Died before wrestling took off in the U.S. Best known today, of course, as the father-in-law of Rocky Johnson and grandfather of the Dwayne, as I call him. But back in his time, he was a big deal. He carried really the Pacific territories, especially Hawaii, as far as making it a viable place. He is the godfather of Samoan wrestling, almost literally, considering his relationship to the Reverend Amatuanai Anawai, who is the patriarch of the Anawai family, and also one of the gentlest people that anyone has ever met. He really, a great guy, somebody everybody loved, but also one of the first people to really bring Samoan and Pacific Island wrestling into the United States. And just because he left too soon, he's kind of underappreciated.
Yeah. And even just saying he was one of the gentlest human beings, that's basically outside the ring on it, because inside the ring, Peter Maivia was considered one of the toughest men in the business to boo. So that also has to be kept in it, where he was very similar to, say, a more modern person like Haku, who was seen as the heavyweight champion backstage on it, where there may have been bigger names and bigger stars, but this guy is the one no one wants to mess with.
Yeah, the toughness of the Samoan wrestlers, and even just in the Pacific Islands, you had people from Tonga, from Fiji, from Samoa especially. It was just a point of pride to demonstrate your toughness and to be a cut above the usual cloth of a wrestler in that era. So, and it was borne out by the fans' love for him. I mean, Peter Maivia had a huge following, not only in Hawaii but out in California as well.
Yeah, it's also, even though he was mostly known in the U.S. outside of Hawaii, mostly in places like San Francisco on it, he seems like he'd be similar to Andy Kaufman in that regard of they didn't do much outside the territory days because they died just before the territory wrestling went national, but you kind of know if wrestling went national, Maivia would have been a huge pick, an early pick by WWF, and he would have probably been a bigger star than he was.
I mean, I just remember from the Hall of Fame ceremonies, Afa talking about how they got into the business because of the huge rivalry in San Francisco between Peter Maivia and Pat Patterson, which oftentimes led to rioting in the Cow Palace.
Well, I mean, if you've ever listened to the wrestling Legends of Wrestling Roundtable from the network, Pat Patterson goes into explicit detail about some of the riots that they used to have at the Cow Palace whenever he would wrestle Peter Maivia. He mentioned some of the, I believe he was the Wild Samoans before they actually got into the business, would occasionally charge the ring in San Francisco to defend the High Chief. I mean, that's just how much the fans love Peter Maivia. They really and truly loved that man. And if Pat Patterson and Ray Stevens got too much heat on him, then it was going to be a bad day for Pat in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, you got to be careful sometimes. It's just kind of the way it goes. Mm-hmm. Of course, every organization needs a healthy mid card, and this is no exception. So we're going to look at the faces first and the heels second here on NXT. The mid card faces. This is a pretty good list, I think. We have Chris Candido, Canyon, Crash Holly, Hayabusa, Public Enemy, Betty Grable, June Byers, Mountain Fiji, Tom Zenk, Pepper Gomez, John Tenta, Don Leo Jonathan just added. You look up and down this list, and is there any name you think that stands out, probably has more upward mobility than any of the others?
Ooh, that is... That's a tough one. It's such a diverse crew.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are you thinking, Thomas?
Well, honestly, the big thing is that the diversity actually feels more like NXT in real life than you'd think on it, because there's someone who has answers for everything. They have a healthy women's division in Grable, Byers, and Fiji, with Fiji playing a monster who can get who's popular with the fans as well. You've got got popular tag teams like Public Enemy and Tenta and Jonathan. You've got people who've got fun gimmicks like Candido, Canyon, Holly, and even Pepper Gomez with his famous one could be a comedy gimmick in there. And you've got a top foreign star like Hayabusa. That's really a case where pretty much anyone on that list could probably get a following if it was a NXT-like promotion.
Yeah, I mean, if we were able to transport Hayabusa from, say, 1995, 1996 into 2018, he would be a huge star for the brand. He would be on the level of a Ricochet because he had enormous physical talent. It was, a shame that his career was cut so short by his injury. But when you look at Hayabusa's track record and just the aesthetic that he presented in the ring, he just had a certain coolness about him that would make him especially popular no matter where he wrestled.
And he did some time at ECW too, and they really took to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was Heatwave 98, I'm wanting to say. He made an appearance in a tag match. Don't hold me to that. I haven't watched that show in a dog's age, but Yeah, he made some appearances in ECW, very much present in FMW during its existence in Japan. Appeared in one of the J-Cups, I believe, in the mid-'90s as well. So he was kind of all over the place before his injury.
Yep. And that's really the benefit, because there's a lot of people who could probably have upward mobility as well. You could buy Tom Zenker Canyon having the look on it and all the tools for a main event run there on it. And you could probably buy people like the Public Enemy had a cult following in ECW. You can imagine it would have the same in this one. You could probably imagine with how Full Sail acts in these ones that Afterlife Full Sail would probably get a kick out of Candido or Crash. So,
yeah, and the person who's probably the most obscure on this list that we haven't gone with yet, Pepper Gomez, another guy who was big in California back in the territory days, and is part of probably one of my most favorite territory angles ever. Anybody who watched him knows that his whole thing was that he had abs that would make Tony Nese jealous, and he claimed nobody could hurt him in the stomach. Well, Ray Stevens took him up on this offer, and pretty famously decided, if I can't hurt him with a knee drop on the top rope, maybe I'll try it with a ladder and see what happens. And of course, once he got up on the ladder, he changed trajectory, slammed his knee into Gomez's throat, and bam, instant feud that made tons of money.
Mm-hmm.
He was a huge star out in California. He was one of the biggest stars in wrestling out on the West Coast in the 60s, especially. A lot of people don't remember how big of a territory Los Angeles used to be. But you listen to Jim Cornette, he'll talk about it on his shows all the time. Los Angeles was the place you wanted to go up until the early 1970s. And Pepper Gomez was absolutely one of the mainstays of that region. So he had a lot of memorable feuds out in California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the record, by the way, it was Heatwave 98 that Hayabusa and Jinsei Shinzaki challenged RVD and Sabu. So
there we go.
Yeah. And that would actually, even with hot angles like Pepper Gomez's, it's almost a surprise that you don't have anything that you would have for the evil heel to come deliberately injures a beloved babyface in some way, and the babyface has to vow revenge angle yet. Like, you'd think that would make sense on it. Like, why have things like Becky Lynch attacks Charlotte during its random appearance at the Performance Center when you can have Becky Lynch breaks Charlotte's arm and Charlotte has to come back from it and vow revenge?
You don't see too many work injuries nowadays. It's kind of weird. Maybe it's because with social media, we're all sort of aware when it's a fake injury, so we don't really buy it as much. I don't know.
Well, it's
I'm ashamed though.
It's also a case where it's weird when they try to make the worked injury and also go with the shoot injury that they're trying to do. Like, for instance, if Batista has a pulled bicep on things like that, they would say stuff like, Batista pulled his bicep in a vicious attack by Randy Orton, and Orton also broke his arm because Orton was working the arm instead.
I've always wondered if the downfall of the injury angle kind of coincided with the company, WWE, going public. I mean, occasionally you'll still see some companies run injury angles, but WWE hasn't really done it in a long time, and I was always curious as to whether them going public had anything to do with it. Maybe worried about a fake injury angle affecting stock prices if one of their big stars is out for a couple of weeks, especially if it's like a John Cena in the mid-2000s. You don't want to take him off of your touring circuit because you're trying to sell his merch and everything. And it was always kind of a what-if scenario there for me.
Yeah, especially considering that, as we all remember, when Vince, quote-unquote, sold the Raw brand to Donald Trump, stock prices legitimately took a dive because nobody realized that it was all a joke.
Exactly. So.
Yep. But that's just another case where the Wall Street can be fooled by things that wouldn't fool the densest mark in the pro wrestling scene. So
it's all just weird. That's all you can say about it, is that it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the heel side of our NXT rosters also got some really diverse talent. I love that about being able to drag from everywhere. Adrian Adonis, Bad News Brown, the dynamic duo, King Iakea, Tanaka and Fuji, your tag champions. Makan Singh, somebody I think really got a raw deal at the national level. Dick Slater just added the first three Villanos, and Black Shadow, somebody that not too many people outside of Mexico are familiar with. Black Shadow was involved in one of the first ever blood feuds with El Santo, and he and Santo had one of the most famous mask versus mask matches in lucha history. So just based on that, he gets a spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good catch. I think, one of the interesting things about modern wrestling is that there's such an exposure to different styles. The cultural exchange between Japanese wrestling and British wrestling, American wrestling, it's really become prolific on the independent scene. But the independent scene has never really taken to lucha libre as much as it has the other wrestling styles. But there's so much rich and wonderful history in lucha libre that people miss out on. It's really interesting to go and look into some of these promotions, because probably of all the major wrestling scenes, the Mexican wrestling scene is one of the most respected and most taken seriously in the general culture that surrounds it. Lucha libre wrestlers can hide their real identities, being lucha libre performers under the mask, and it's just so interesting to go and look at some of the old footage, some of the old matches too, and just chart some of the success that some of the legends of the sport had down in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so wild to see just how seriously Mexico still takes not just the concept of kayfabe, but the concept of wrestling in general. Mm-hmm. You would never see this in the U.S., but all the major newspapers down there have sort of a gentleman's agreement that they will not reveal a person's real name until the mask comes off. And that's something I just can't fathom happening in North America, in the U.S., I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually that's one of the...
Another name I really want to emphasize more in this mid-card location. Hold on, Tommy, I can barely hear you. Could you repeat that?
Oh, what I was just going to continue on this one is that, like Biff had said, one of the big weaknesses that seems to be for Mexican wrestling is, even though everybody knows that lucha libre had such a big effect on the cruiserweight style, which gave way to the X Division style, which gave way to what the modern styles become, it's a problem that you can almost say that lucha libre didn't get any respect because literally one guy, in this case Gabe Sapolsky, wasn't a fan of lucha libre, and Ring of Honor was so focused on what the independent style basically became, and by that what the wrestling style of the 2010s has become.
Yeah, and the good news is that's changing. You're seeing a lot of people from Mexico being able to make the move up, most notably, of course, Penta El Cerrabiedo and Ray Phoenix, who have really taken the U.S. by storm. So hopefully there's going to be sort of a knock-on effect there. It would be nice to see people like Rush and El Terrible make the jump to the U.S. For a while.
Well, I think that Rush has already been confirmed for MLW, so that's kind
of... Well, there you go. And, of course, the other thing is that, one of the other influences Lucha has is that if you're a legend and you can still go, they will still they'll still take you out there. I mean, you see things like L.A. Park, like PCO nowadays, people who are in their 50s and are still capable of holding matches. They're still getting work everywhere. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's an appreciation for wrestling in Mexico that doesn't exist. A broader cultural appreciation that doesn't necessarily exist anywhere else in the world right now. Like you said, the respect to the veterans, guys like Dr. Wagner Jr., who I grew up watching, trading tapes in the 90s when he would ever make appearances in Japan for some of the Super Junior tournaments. And, he's still wrestling today. He's still going strong. And you have the infusion of the Lucha Libre style kind of slowly making inroads, with shows like Lucha Underground. Some of the performers that have kind of broke through on Impact, here over the last couple of months and years, it seems to slowly be filtering north. There was the fusion of the Lucha Libre performers in the 90s, and now it's like that second big wave is slowly starting to kind of crest now.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody else on this mid-card heel side I want to talk about, just because I think that he doesn't get the respect he deserves. Makan Singh. Mike Shaw, as he was born, was one of the top heels in Stampede Wrestling under Makan Singh, a member of Karachi Vice. He was supposed to be this giant Pakistani wrestler, had great feuds with Owen Hart up in Stampede. Almost, it was able to make it national, but was a victim of the fact that neither WCW nor the WF really wanted to take that gimmick. I know Global Wrestling allowed him to be Makan Singh for their run on ESPN, but in WCW he was better known as Norman the Lunatic. And while that wasn't a career-killing gimmick or anything, it certainly had a ceiling on it. Then he goes to the WWF, and Vince McMahon, in his infinite wisdom, decides to make him Bastion Booger, which may be the stupidest fucking gimmick ever in World Wrestling Federation history.
Objection. It wasn't even the stupidest gimmick that Mike Shaw had in the WWF.
Friar Ferguson.
Friar Ferguson, yes.
No, I'm gonna be. I might be contrarian here a little bit. I actually liked Norman the Lunatic when he first debuted. Now there is something to be said. I mean, because if you look at it, they kind of played it up like they did with George the Animal Steel when George Steele started making a babyface turn. There's something to be said about playing up the big monster character as this kind of big lovable oaf that's really gentle but can still kick your ass if need be. I think they could have done something with that character, but Ole Anderson apparently hated Mike Shaw's guts in real life. And so Mike Shaw was never going to get a fair shake when Ole Anderson came back into power. But I actually did like his interaction with Teddy Long, even though it was completely over the top, with the big golden key that kind of represented his trip back to the funny farm, as it were. Mm-hmm. It was some good stuff in there.
Well, yeah. I'm not saying it wasn't good stuff. I'm just saying that there was a built-in ceiling to it. And somebody like Mike Shaw, who had the ability to be really that upper mid-card sort of main event gatekeeper monster heel, was never going to get there as long as he was saddled with this persona.
Well, honestly, that's why I from the same thing, I would consider Mike Shaw for a modern-day equivalent very similar to Brodus Clay in that regard, where they're good. They would have had upper mid-card gatekeeper potential on this one, but they just didn't have it to be that for very long, and they probably wouldn't have been able to sustain it that long. But they were also shrewd enough to say, okay, I'm going to go with a lesser gimmick that's more goofy, more fun, and more kid-friendly on it, so that I may not get the big heights of main events on this one, but I'll have a career for as long as I want to have a career, because everyone will book me some weekend at some show just so their kids can take pictures with Bastion Booger, or take pictures with Trucker Norm, or take pictures with Friar Ferguson, or Norman the Lunatic. And that's a very, very straightforward thing to use on the indie scene, where you aren't going to go broke with a goofy gimmick.
Oh, sure. I'm sure that Norman probably would have been a highlight in some of the smaller indies as he went on. I'm just thinking about how it would be here, and I think that Makan Singh was far and away his best work, which is kind of why we represent him with that. Yeah,
and his best work was Makan Singh, but he had some fun moments on the small time indies. Like I remember this one angle they talked about in the Aftermags where Bastion Booger was getting a shot at the title, and the evil villain of that one said, you can have a shot, either a title shot, a night with my valet cookie, or a pizza. And so Bastion Booger thought, so I can have the title shot, I can have a cookie, or I can have a pizza?
The 90s were a very strange breed for wrestling. So
yes.
You had to.
The steroid crowds really did a number. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. I mean, people talk about how bad modern wrestling is, and while 2018 WWE is no picnic, it's not quite as morally offensive as 1994 WWF. Let's just put it that way. So.
Hell, we all survived WCW 2000. This is nothing. This is nothing what's going on right now.
Hey, 3 count forever, baby.
The lower card, just the filler on NXT, you have as faces Tommy Rogers, John Cronus, Anthony Durante, the Pitbull. On the heel side, you have Buddy Landel, Luscious Johnny V, Maniac Matt Bourne, and Test. Basically a collection of people waiting for their tag partners to see if they can move up in the world. In a lot of cases, though, Buddy Landel, somebody that I think deserves a little more credit. Most people just remember him as being the other Nature Boy, but he's somebody who, especially in the lower territories, was a top-notch heel.
Yeah, very much so. Buddy Landel's worst enemy in life was Buddy Landel. He didn't get his head straight. He had a lot of demons that he wrestled with. But when he was on, he was one of the best territorial era heels of his generation. I mean, he had a lot of natural talent. It was pretty effortless for him. And Buddy Landel, absolutely an awesome inclusion here. I want to sing the praises. Whoever thought it was a good idea to put Matt Bourne on here, kudos to you. Matt Bourne could be the sleeper on the heel side this far down, because Matt Bourne, a lot of people look back at the Doink character and the babyface run and just kind of dismiss it. Evil Doink was class. That was a choice gimmick. Matt Bourne had the cerebralness, that cerebral, quiet, unsettling charm to pull off the evil clown gimmick. It worked to perfection. And he was a good worker, too. Very strong.
Yeah. Very good. By the way, for those who don't know the history, 1993, when Doink was introduced, it was Matt Bourne, and he was playing it as a sort of the clown of your nightmares. The change came when he left, and Doink was getting really popular as a villain, so they turned him into a family-friendly clown, which, again, misses the point. But the face Doink that everyone remembers, who was okay, actually, let's not say he wasn't, was a longtime indie worker by the name of Ray Caselli, who, of course, teamed up with Tiger Jackson as Dink the Clown. And really, when you added Dink, things just went downhill in a hurry.
Yeah, but even with those ones, that's why I think that of the lower card people, Matt Bourne would have the chance to go through and be a star in a Full Sail type situation, because you'd have Evil Doink, and not just that, but Bourne himself having the ability to say, okay, I'm going to turn this one to a little bit more modernized for it. So like in the 1990s or 2000s, he'd say, okay, ICP is popular. I'll go more of a Juggalo style with Doink the Clown. And in the late 2000s and until his death, he thought, hey, Dark Knight is popular. I'll try to be more like a Heath Ledger's Joker kind of clown, and be one of the few people on the shitty indie scene that could actually play the Heath Ledger's Joker character right.
Absolutely. This is somebody, and by the way, I can tell you right now, NXT is considering bringing Buzz Sawyer in a team with Bourne. If those two team up, watch out.
Good Lord. Buzz Sawyer was a psychotic. just legitimately psychotic. Buzz Sawyer and Matt Bourne as the crazy heel tag team. That tag team would go a long way. A long way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
let's also talk, Commissioner needs no introduction. Fritz von Erich is the on-screen commissioner. The announcers, I think, are two people that really don't get the respect within wrestling that they deserve. One a territory guy, one a modern-day guy. Dick Lane and Mike Hogwood. Dick Lane did the LA territory, was very popular there. He's a Wrestling Observer Hall of Famer. Mike Hogwood was a longtime Ring of Honor announcer, play-by-play guy. Also is most famous for his work with ACC Sports. Mm-hmm. But he loved wrestling, loved that work. Those two together, I think, would have a lot of good chemistry and be able to get over the sport of NXT in a very good way.
Yeah. It's surprising that Hogwood didn't get looked at for other ones after the HDNet era of Ring of Honor happened, because he did have the legit sports chops, and WWE was willing to say, okay, you have this legit sports build, we'll work around that one as well. And he just also felt like he was actually interested in what was happening and could get across, yeah, I'm a fan of this too. I'm shocked. I'm as shocked as you are.
Yeah, I gotta confess, living where I do here in the Charlotte area, Mike Hogwood was a institution for years and years on the Raycom Sports broadcast whenever they would do ACC football. I mean, there's always the same programming on CBS here in the fall. The 12 o'clock game is an ACC game, and Mike Hogwood would be covering that for Raycom Sports, and then it would transition over to Vern and, oh God, what's his name for the
Gary Danielson is who you're thinking of?
Yeah. There you go. The SEC game at 3:30. But he was an institution with college football and even with some NASCAR coverage too over the years. So it was always interesting that he kind of got into Ring of Honor wrestling when he did, because he was known for his mainstream stuff with college football and NASCAR. So it was just kind of a little neat transition there when he got in.
Well, that's always been the case of the HDNet era and now the Access era, where Mark Cuban's always been willing to put the money into what he's going for on it. So, and once HDNet got Ring of Honor, he was willing to say, okay, we're going to give you the best possible for it, just like everything else. So, which it does change things now, where Ring of Honor doesn't get money put into it.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that it's sort of turned into New Japan Light, New Japan NXT almost. But, nothing against Ian Riccoboni, but I think Mike Hogwood was the best announcer that they had.
Mm-hmm.
I would concur with that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
if you look up and down this NXT roster, you see a lot of diverse talent. You see a lot of different personalities. As I mentioned, of course, we have the huge six-man up top. We have Tanaka and Fuji holding together a tag division. We got a lot of people who have a chance for upward mobility. What one feud, assuming you don't turn anyone along the way, Biff, what one feud would you most want to see?
Just looking at the rosters and the face and heel alignment as they exist right here. One feud that I would absolutely love to see is Pepper Gomez taking on Chris Adams. And the reason for that is you're looking at two distinct generations of performers. Pepper Gomez coming in the 50s and 60s. Gentleman Chris Adams, of course, very big and world-class in the 80s. But I feel like Chris Adams had the right mix of old school mentality with just a touch of the new school. Like, he was definitely kind of a throwback performer, but he also had enough flash and flair to, get over in the 80s and world class. I think Pepper Gomez and Chris Adams could be a tremendous feud. That would be probably one that I would love to book.
That's a great call right there. I'll tell you one that I think would be a lot of fun to see would be George Steele against Bad News Brown. With Bad News, you had somebody who was, his whole style was that he was underhanded, is that he had no friends. He would charge everyone. He would attack everyone. Kind of I would say he knew what he was doing. He was basically a badass before badass. And with George Steele, a lot of people forget because they remember the cuddly version that went after Miss Elizabeth. But if he wanted to, he could tear you apart. So if you get those two together and you gave them a reason to escalate it, you'd be looking at something where you could easily have an Extreme Rules match that would tear the house down.
I'd have two possible options on this one. One of them is kind of cheating because it's not one if there's no turns in this one, because I personally feel that if we assume that the NXT in the Afterlife is like the NXT in the real world, this would probably have the fans double turn them, and that would be Tom Zenk versus Adrian Adonis. Because Tom Zenk was always a solid wrestler, but he was just the type of pretty boy that you know that Full Sail or ECW or any of the hardcore fans clubhouse promotions would have torn apart in their whole view. And Zenk was good, but he was never so good like guys like Pillman or stuff like that they could rise above just being the pretty boy.
He would have been a poor man CJ Parker, kind of.
And Adrian Adonis, but whether the fact that he was a legitimate tough guy, he was a legitimate thing, and just the change in viewpoints between 1986 gay rights and 2018 gay rights, Adrian Adonis would be the Velveteen Dream today.
Oh, there's a statement.
Mm-hmm. Well, Adonis was very good in the ring, and they had similar androgynous gimmicks, though Adonis never even went with the androgynous, and he said flat out, yes, he was a gay guy on that one. So you could absolutely see the Full Sail in the Afterlife taking to him like Full Sail took to the Dream.
I'm not sorry. The better news is that Tom Zenk, if he were to click as a heel, would have a natural space in sort of the Robbinsdale Club if he ever got the call up. Because spoiler alert, like this is any bit of a surprise, Kurt Hennig and Rick Rude are waiting on the main roster for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the other one that I'd say if I had no heel turn would basically be, look at this heel roster on NXT: Dick Murdoch, Dory Funk Sr., Big John Studd, Nikolai Volkov, Adrian Adonis, Bad News Brown, the dynamic duo, King Curtis Iakea, Mr. Fuji and Professor Tanaka, Makan Singh, Dick Slater, the Vianos, Black Shadow, Buddy Landell, Johnny V, Matt Bourne, and Test. All a bunch of tough guys, tough, legit badasses. Now throw Crash Holly holding the hardcore title in, and watch him run away from every single person on that list.
Or if you really want to go that way, how about Crash Holly against Makan Singh in a battle of super heavyweights?
That would also be very good. But just looking at that list, you know that Crash Holly's dynamic with everybody on that list, just trying to run away from getting killed by them again, would just be amazing.
And he's got a point. I mean, a lot of wrestling fans loved the 2000 WWF Hardcore title scene and how it was, it took a title that had, honestly, the Falls County War dynamic had sort of overstayed its course. You couldn't play it to the hilt the way you could at ECW, so they turned it into a comedy title, and it just worked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really, really fun times. I mean, I don't think that it was sustainable long term because of the proliferation of our awareness of the injuries to the head, and some of the shots that those guys used to take was just insane. And the hardcore style definitely wore people out. I mean, wrestling got so over the top, theatrical, and violent in the early 2000s that the injury rate started creeping up. But for its era, it really did a great job of giving lower card wrestlers something to do that kind of hid their weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And Crash Holly, absolutely one of the shining examples of that entire division, made a career out of that. And it sucks that he's gone now because, in this era of nostalgia, someone like Crash Holly could have been, a nostalgia act that gets brought back every couple of years. Mm-hmm. Kind of like a James Ellsworth almost. He would have been like this generation's James Ellsworth. So,
yeah, I hear that.
Even then, you also have the case that he'd have this question mark if he had lived. He probably gets in the Hall of Fame because remember, the Grand Slam is the gold standard of WWE. Where if you've held the Grand Slam of titles, you're a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it. And Crash Holly is the only person to hold 4 titles in the WWF without holding the World or Intercontinental or U.S. title. And that's a pretty good accomplishment.
I'm struggling to think now. I guess it would have been the European, the tag, the hardcore, and
the old light heavyweight title.
Oh, that's right. The light heavyweight title. Okay. Mm-hmm. So
Also, by the way, fans out there, if you have access to Japan and you want to see some of the craziness of the hardcore antics, look up DDT Pro. It has the Iron Man heavy metalweight title, which is essentially the same thing, only Japan has removed all pretense of taking it seriously. They've had ladder matches where the ladder has won the title. They have had the title win itself. They've had Joey Ryan has, for example, has absolutely run wild with the idea that the title can change hands at any time and any place. Some of the videos that he's posted are great. That's the kind of stuff that the WWF would do. Not quite the extreme example because they have to televise it all, but it's just hilarious when they think about it.
Yes, and it's gotten more hilarious when they did this one, where it's not just ladder matches where the ladder won the title. The ladder won many, many titles, and they had a big retirement ceremony for the ladder for all the titles that it won, just like the retirement ceremonies for any other great retired wrestler. DDT is messed up.
Somewhere Jim Cornette.
Take everything you know about comedy wrestling, add a big dose of Japan, and you have DDT Pro. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
All right. So that's looking over the NXT roster. Let's go to the SmackDown side. This is the side that I'm more involved in than Tommy. He does more of the Raw side, so I'll sort of guide you through some of the stories that are going in here. But first, let's look at the roster just so that we get a good taste of it. The main event, we got 5 fantastic main eventers, I think. On the face side, you have Big Daddy Shirley Crabtree, Rowdy Roddy Piper, and Lou Thesz. On the heel side, you've got our champion, Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, and the original Sheik with his mouthpiece, Gary Hart. Now, these are names that are very familiar to anyone who knows wrestling. If you're just an American wrestling fan, though, you might be surprised to see Big Daddy Crabtree up there. I want to say right now that he is one of the premier British wrestlers, was one of the biggest draws in England. Really, if you've ever seen an English wrestling fan, they know who he is. They know all about him. He comes there with the top hat and the singlet, very recognizable. One of the best super heavyweights out there of his time. Biff, you've probably seen a lot more of him than I have, and I've seen a little bit of him, but you could probably go into more detail.
Well, Big Daddy, it's interesting that he's on this list because we actually had a show a couple of weeks ago looking at this year's Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame ballot, and he's on the list this year for possible induction. And Big Daddy Crabtree, Big Daddy, generally just known as Big Daddy towards the end of his career, he was a mainstay in the British wrestling scene. I mean, he was it. He was kind of one of the top attractions. I don't think that it would be fair to compare him to a Billy Robinson or a Mark Rocco, Rollerball Rocco, or a Johnny Saint, even in terms of actual talent in the ring. I think, Billy Robinson is kind of the classic wrestler to come out of Britain, whereas Big Daddy is more of an attraction. Mm-hmm. I think he's more based on his personality and his charisma. And I mean, you say what you want about his drawing power. I mean, he was able to put himself on top in the British wrestling scene for a long time. And this is despite going, toe to toe with some of those great, shoot wrestlers out of Manchester, the guys that could hook you and really hurt you if they wanted to. Distinctive look, fun personality, gotta be completely honest. He's not my personal cup of tea, but he's absolutely someone that everyone should watch at least once just to say you've seen it because he is so over the top in his charisma.
Yeah, and that's really the thing where he's far closer to the Hulk Hogan of Britain than you would think of anything else because British wrestling's becoming big now because of Progress, ICW, and NXT UK and in the style getting big to fans now. So the best way to describe it is take your favorite NXT UK performer, a British strong style, a Mark Andrews, a Tony Storm. Think of the exact opposite of that. That's Big Daddy Crabtree. He was not very good in the ring at all, but like Hulk Hogan, he was very very good at charisma and getting people to see him. And also, like Hulk Hogan, he got to the top because of politics and apparently didn't really care about kids at all, which was the whole point of his gimmick, that he likes kids.
If you really had to compare him to someone, he's kind of a Bruno Sammartino of England in terms of being the proto main eventer back in the day when main eventing was, back in the day when it was more about aura than it was about in-ring storytelling.
Well, it's not even just the aura thing on it, because British wrestling was always seen as big things on it. Like, even in the 60s and 70s, just before Big Daddy really hit, you had guys like Frank Sinatra telling everybody British wrestling is the only real pro wrestling in the world. And then guys like Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks threw a wrench into all of that and turned British wrestling into what it was for a long time.
Yeah, it kind of went more into, I don't want to say vaudeville. That's not exactly the best way to describe it. But they introduced like a certain level of camp into it, which, you have to understand British comedy to kind of understand some of what they were infusing into the wrestling scene. But dramatically different from what you would consider like the British strong style or the evolution of that. That's why I kind of like comparing him to Billy Robinson. Whereas Robinson was kind of treated as the wrestler's wrestler, Big Daddy is definitely more of a box office type of guy who you're not going to impress anybody with his in-ring work, but his personality and his presence in the ring. He's basically like a big, giant version of Otis from Heavy Machinery. Mm-hmm. More like Dick Murdoch.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I don't mean to demean Otis. I love Otis, but he's definitely, Big Daddy. If you're trying to visualize him, if you don't have Google handy, just imagine someone in a giant singlets with a huge beer belly, kind of like a cross between Dick Murdoch and Tom Baker of Doctor Who fame. So,
and honestly, he does have his own benefit of what British wrestling has changed to it, because Big Daddy, he did mention British comedy on this one, and the pantomime scene is a very big part of British culture on this one.
Yes.
And Big Daddy did bring the pantomime culture to pro wrestling. And you can see that now, even in British wrestlers who come to the U.S., where a lot of them are amazing at their facials, amazing at working really, really broad, just like all the things you get in the pantomime.
Yeah, you can see the influence in pantomime in William Regal and Bad News Barrett, and how they used their facial expressions to expand their characters.
Yeah, that's exactly the word I was looking for. The pantomime influence that kind of came in there. It was kind of a sign of the times when Big Daddy started getting really big. And I mean, he was on top for a long, long time. I mean, you got to give him props for his longevity.
Yeah,
I mean, he first started main eventing in, I want to say, the 60s, maybe. I can verify that for you. It might have even been in the 1950s when he started getting big. But, I mean, he was working on top until 1991, 1992 at the latest. So,
yeah.
I mean, he absolutely had a huge run. And made himself a lot of money doing it. So can't knock him for the hustle. I mean, he was absolutely a big star in Britain.
Absolutely. The upper mid card here got a lot of variety, a lot of people who were on top for a long time. I'm really proud of sort of the variety in this group in terms of locations, nationalities, everything else like that. The face side, you have Jack Briscoe, our television champ Vern Gagne, Jumbo Tsuruta, JYD, Mitsuru Captain Lou. On the heel side, you have Chris Benoit, Classy Freddie Blassie, the Gotch family, Frank and Carl, family in quotation marks, as you can imagine, and George Hackenschmidt and Toots Monk, both managed by Billy Sandow. The one I really want to talk about as far as sort of sticking out is Freddie Blassie. Not because he's not good or anything, but because everybody remembers how great he was as a manager. Everyone remembers how game-changing he was in the World Wrestling Federation as a manager, that really his time as a wrestler gets overlooked. And he was one of the first people really to be that evil foreigner in the Japanese scene and draw a lot of money doing it.
Not even just draw a lot of money. Or at least 8 to 20 Japanese people had heart attacks watching Freddie Blassie. That should say how despicable and evil he was in his day. Like, it wasn't said how many people in full, but it was said that there was one angle where he had sharpened angles and he had made his opponent bleed, and he drank some of the blood like a vampire on it, and that caused 8 people alone to have heart attacks from watching it. They were just that scared of him.
Yeah, I think it would be fair to say, he had a big run in Japan with Rikidozan, or Rikidozan, as Jim Ross would pronounce it. Had a big run with him in Japan, made a lot of money. In the 60s and into the early 1970s, Freddie Blassie was to Los Angeles what Eddie Farhat, the Sheik, was to Detroit. Like, he was the preeminent superstar in Los Angeles. That's where you went to make your money in the wrestling business in the 60s. Fred Blassie was holding court with guys like, Gene LaBelle, Dick the Bruiser out there, the Mass Destroyer. That's where the money was. That was like the preeminent territory. That was the Cadillac of NWA territories in the 1960s, was that Los Angeles WWA promotion. And, Fred Blassie was the big star that you went to make the money with. So people that only remember him for his managerial run, it was a great run as a manager. He was one of the big, instruments in WWF going national, one of the big heel managers of the brand in the mid-'80s. But to dismiss him as a wrestler is really inappropriate because he had a very successful career.
And we were joined by the other person on the Connoisseurs of Wrestling, TakersMinion. Great to see you.
Yeah, good evening. I just got off of work hanging door trim and whatnot, building outdoors.
No problem.
So I got some. I'm going to step away here for a minute. I got some food on the stove I got to get. So go on and talk some more with yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
What are we talking about?
When you come back, I'll add you to the spreadsheet link so you can see it and check out the roster as it stands. We've already gone over NXT's portion. We're sort of running down the SmackDown brand here.
Okay.
You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this show, Taker.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And there's actually a good mix of them that was meant not just in this one, but the main event one. Because if you look at it, each guy on the main event on SmackDown has a very distinct style for it. You had Big Daddy, who was the hero of the kids and the Hulk Hogan of the show. Roddy Piper, who was like the great promo and the guy who got you into the building by talking you in. You have Luthez, the quintessential shooter. You have Buddy Rogers, the nature boy and the heel that way. And you have the original Sheik, who's basically the force of nature.
Okay.
And before you ask, yes, Roddy Piper and original Sheik are in a feud right now. And no, the building cannot contain it.
Damn. Okay. All right, let me go get my food.
Go for it. All right. Going to the mid-card now. It's a side, but hopefully there are some names that we can discuss in here. You have Mildred Burke. You have Chyna. You have the Von Erich brothers, David and Kerry, in this case, who are the tag team champions. You have Gory Guerrero, also managed by Captain Lou. You have the Chiefs, Wahoo McDaniel and Jay Strongbow. And you have Bruno Sammartino. The one surprise here, I would guess, is Mildred Burke, the one name that people probably later on would not click immediately with. But Mildred Burke is kind of the anti-Moolah of her time, not just in terms of being a great face versus a great heel, but also in terms of how she was as a real human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the cases where Mildred Burke was basically the person who started women's wrestling as a thing on it, and it wasn't until Moolah took over and decided to turn it to what Fabulous Moolah wanted and have people work her style of it that women's wrestling became the joke that it is today. So Mildred Burke was very important in that aspect.
Yeah, she would be considered one of the first legitimately great in-ring female stars in the business. Not just a character that drew money, but someone that actually took the business seriously and took her training seriously. And that's not to diminish some of the workers that Fabulous Moolah trained over the years, because she did produce some good workers. Leilani Kai, prime example. She had a very solid career for herself. But Mildred Burke was one of the first in-ring competitors, female in-ring competitors, that got over not just on the oddity of seeing women's wrestling at an age when there weren't many female wrestlers, but on the strength of her talent as well. I mean, she was a very talented in-ring worker.
Mm-hmm.
So
definitely, and definitely earned her spot here. There's not much of a women's division, which is the only downside of working exclusively with the Afterlife. A lot of the great women's wrestlers are more recent and therefore still alive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really the case where there's not that many places to go to. You have either the people from the real long level on it, or you have the people from the 80s and 90s, and even then, most of the time it's basically people who are still alive, and you'll see some of that in other people on the SmackDown roster, or you have things that are just complete blips in the universe that they died this young. So, and most of them would be people who would be lower than NXT level on this.
Well, talking about tag teams and whatnot, talking about women wrestling, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of what we're on right now. Go for it.
Well, the jump, and Biff knows this, and I'm going to bring it up. A lot of what you see someone like Becky Lynch and some others doing today, the Jumping Bomb Angels were doing in the 80s.
Yeah, but that's also
absolutely
the on this one, where we all agree that the Jumping Bomb Angels are great, but the Jumping Bomb Angels are still alive, which is the whole point of this. Remember, This is an Afterlife Wrestling Federation. So,
Okay.
So as a result, maybe the best women's wrestler who is doing the most stuff like them would be Plum Mariko, who's one of the lower carders on the SmackDown brand.
Right. I know you got Mae Young on this in the Afterlife. You have to.
Oh, absolutely. We wouldn't miss her for the world.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of good women wrestlers, not just Mae and Moolah.
Mm-hmm.
There were others.
Yeah.
Plenty of others. So, I mean, it's not like, because I heard you saying that, there's not very many. Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
There are more.
Yeah, we'll see a few more that come along. We'd already talked about how, we've mentioned that Mildred and Chyna are on the face side here. Sitting around at NXT waiting for calls, we've got Betty Grable, June Byers, and why not Mountain Fiji from Glow, because, Glow really doesn't get enough credit.
Yeah.
Even with the Netflix series going on. And there's about 6 or 7 other women who have made the cut, so when they come along, we'll be able to include them.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's really the thing where it's not just that women's wrestling is at a bad level or a good level on it. It's the fact that most of the best women's wrestlers are still alive. So you have to keep that as well.
Over on the heel side in the mid-card for our SmackDown brand, it's a little larger in terms of roster and in terms of who's there. We've got Perros Del Mal, Hector Garza, and Perro Aguayo Jr., Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, the Freebird team of Buddy Roberts and Terry Gordy, the Giant Haystacks, Andy Kaufman's sticking around, why not? The Vachon family, Mad Dog Vivian and Luna, you have the Fabulous Moolah, and you have Billy Sandow's most recent acquisition, Billy Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
If you gave me 30 minutes and told me just like on a B-Town, just put whatever match together you could as a solid main event. You give me 30 minutes and you give me Wahoo McDaniel taking on Billy Robinson, and I will sell that building out 5 times over. Just from the sheer
that's
that match. So
yes, please.
And yeah,
most certainly. We talked about Billy Robinson. I most want to discuss in this list would be Rhonda Singh, actually. Somebody who, unfortunately for everyone involved, was best known as Harvey Whitman's trailer park trash girlfriend, Bertha Faye, but someone who she was the Vader of the women's scene in the 90s. She was an incredible athlete. She was huge. She did a great job being the foil for any hero that you may have wanted. doesn't get nearly enough credit just because, like we said with Mikan Singh down in NXT, she got called up with the absolute worst possible idea.
Yeah, and that was actually a weird thing where, of all the great Joshi stars that WWE imported in the 90s to work with Alundra Blaze, Rhonda Singh probably had the worst luck of any of them because she was a gaijin in Japan, so they could use her in different ways. Like, if you had people like Aja Khan, you bring them to the U.S., they're still going to be Aja Khan. You have other Joshi stars on it, they're still going to be Joshi stars, and they were treated well, but Rhonda Singh could be turned into Bertha Faye.
Yeah, kind of unfortunate that's how it went about. Not much you can do there, but if you were able to see her in Japan, you would see somebody, like I said, you look at Awesome Kong. Everybody loved Awesome Kong. Rhonda Singh was the Awesome Kong of her time. That's probably the best comparison I could make.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that would be pretty fair. I mean, Monster Ripper was one of the preeminent, just epic, monster wrestlers in Japan in their division. It's unfortunate that, we didn't see a larger infusion of Joshi talent into the WWF in that era. I feel like we were on the cusp of seeing the doors kind of break down. Because that would have been really interesting if you had seen an influx of Joshi stars come into the company in the mid-90s. The history of women's wrestling would have been very different. But unfortunately, it just never quite clicked, especially with Alundra leaving and to go back to WCW, it pretty much shut everything down again. So
yeah, and that was basically the other problem, that most of them were pretty much, it wasn't a choice that the Joshi talent hadn't been good enough. It's just that they didn't get over. Where if you think of all the Joshi talent that WWF and WCW were importing on it, then you had the case where Bull Nakano was the only one who really got even a cult following in the US, much less got over. And that probably hurt things, because then when Sunny clicked in 1996, the fans basically voted with their wallets and said, we'd rather see a really pretty girl than see a girl who's a really good wrestler. And it wasn't until the 2000s when people like Trish Stratus and Lita are with Shimmer, and they decided, say, why don't we take really pretty girls and train them to become really good wrestlers?
It's like the commercial for Tostitos. People are saying, let's get people who are attractive. Let's get people who are good workers. Porque no es dos? Everybody celebrates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's a shame what's happened. It's a shame is what's happened to what the women were during the time of Moolah and all that, to where they were a non-existent entity here in the United States. They were getting bigger over in Japan. They could have had more from Japan come over here. But they weren't given anything either.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't really given anything.
A lot of that had to do with the fact that Moolah literally made the women's division her bitch, which is
yeah, and it says something that even with those ones, there's only one person that Moolah trained, specifically trained up from the ground up without build, who ended up making the cut in any of the divisions. And that was Canyon.
Yeah. So it's we all know that even though it's come out now that, oh, that was not true, that's not true. We all know that Moolah was one who, what's the word I'm looking for?
she was kind of the pimp, wasn't she?
No,
that was the allegations, or some of the allegations.
Yeah, and even if whether or not she actually
exploited. That's what the word I was looking for. She exploited.
There you go.
A lot of the women that she had working for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was really a problem where even if she didn't pimp out the women, she didn't pay the women very well, though most places don't pay the women's or even women's athletes outside of wrestling very well. And you also have the fact that she trained all the women to work her style of wrestling. So it was basically similar to the Johnny Ace era of the Divas beforehand, where instead of training them to be great wrestlers, they trained them to work one specific style of match and click with one specific person.
Very unfortunate there, and that's part of the reason that it was hard to fill a full women's division, unfortunately.
Yeah, they didn't cater to one particular individual, so to speak. They catered to a age demographic of over anxious, hormone charged men.
Yeah, and that's really the difference on it with the Joshi era, because in that era you could have had more stars, but it was also a case where there's always been a male influence on women's wrestling in the U.S., but in Japan it could be different because they viewed the women as being engineered to teenage girls. You were sold as someone who would be a hero for them, someone who was like them and a star to them, and only partially the fact that, yeah, they were totally sold as being a safe lesbian crush to have because they thought that that was just a phase in the 80s, and so they worked with that way. But that was something that worked then, but it was bound to fail by the 2010s or so.
Yeah, because the Biff, you're gonna love this. How many times have I said SJO? It's social or SJW, I should say. Social Justice Warriors.
Oh Lord, yeah.
That's a very touchy subject with me.
Well, it's not even just the social justice warrior factor as much as the fact that as gay and lesbian relationships get more and more accepted, eventually you won't have to have. No, you can have a crush on this girl as your phase on it, and then when you graduate high school, you can be part of this culture on it because it's just not necessary anymore. And then you have to find a way to. How are you going to market Joshi if you're not marketing it to teenage girls? And that's always a case where even with companies like Stardom, which are doing well, there's more of a male influence to them than there would be in the 1980s.
Yeah, Japan isn't big on the whole social justice thing. They have their own weird issues to deal with. For example, I've heard this said several times, women are like Christmas cake in Japan. After they're 26, nobody cares anymore. That's just rough.
I don't know. Because Aja Kong is way past 26 and still is over.
Well, yeah, there are, of course, exceptions. I'm just saying that, retirement comes a lot earlier over there for women.
Io Shirai is over 26 years old. And she's over.
And
she's over here now. Asuka's over 20.
Well, I think it was more in terms of romantic interest than in terms of popularity, but
romantic interest. Why does romantic interest play a part in this? It shouldn't. We all have said, all of us have complained and bitched and moaned and carried on about let the women wrestle. They're not eye candy anymore.
Well, it's not so much that it's a whole big thing on culture where it's not just with women's wrestling or being an actress or something like that, but in all of Japan, the whole image is of Christmas cake is someone who's an unmarried woman for it because they're unedible after the 25th.
This is not a wrestling thing. This is a Japan has issues thing.
Yeah,
okay.
And so it's not just you have to be over 26 or those things as much as the fact that in Japan they think if you're unmarried after your 25th birthday, you're basically unlovable and worthless.
And there's also it should be pointed out in kind of the same vein of this. Joshi wrestling is probably the gold standard as far as actual in-ring quality in women's wrestling, but at the same time, there is a real seedy underbelly to Joshi wrestling in Japan, what some of the performers are forced to do. And I don't mean forced, but there is strong pressure put on performers to do certain things to try and heighten their appeal, and it's just real. There's a dark side that doesn't get exposed over here as much as it probably should.
Well, it's because of the fact that it's also not just the fact that it's women's wrestling as much as in America, being a women's wrestler is its own occupation. In Japan, they basically feel that women's wrestler and model and pop singer are all one occupation. And in America, there's sometimes if you're a women's wrestler, you also have to do modeling work, but they view that any popular job that a woman's entertainer does is connected to each other. And that's a problem because Japan makes Stan Twitter look like respectable fan bases there. There are movements that get accepted for famous idols in Japan to be. They should be forced to not date anyone so that their stalkers can feel like they can date them. That is fucked up. There's no other way to put that, but it's fucked up.
I don't know if Biff mentioned this or not. And I'm going to find, Asuka, Kana over there in their Joshi name, did softcore porn.
We're going to pause here so everybody can go to their Google and look for it.
Yes,
you can't find it there.
This is terrible, PM.
But it's the truth. The Biff brought up the dirty underbelly. That's true. It's out there. And where I found this out from was from my co-host from my show from yesterday, MDS. He told me. And I was like, you're kidding. He goes, oh, no. Most of them do it.
Yeah, that was part of what I was alluding to. I didn't want to actually verbalize it necessarily. I'm not saying, you were wrong to do it. I'm just saying that's part of the dark side where there's this strong implication that you have to do this softcore pornography. It's there's a term for it. I forget. It's like
manga.
It's called
it's gravure.
I think you're looking for hentai.
Well,
no,
gravure is what the women's wrestlers do there on it. And being fair in this one, just from those ones, gravure would be more like that one cute interview that Becky Lynch put on where she was wearing her bra and panties while doing the interview, and less like the videos Candice Michelle did before she went into the WWE. There's a world of difference between gravure and softcore porn.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's supposed to be sensual. It's supposed to be sexual. It's not supposed to be explicit like actual, simulated sex acts. But it's still, something that the women have to do, and I think that's a big reason why you see, especially in the last 5 to 6 years when women's wrestling has kind of picked up in North America. You're seeing an influx of more Joshi stars trying to come over, whether it's through Shimmer or even the WWE system. We've seen, 2 or 3 of the biggest names in Joshi wrestling over the last decade come to the WWE system, either for a short stint or actually to come and work.
Right. Yeah. Kana, Asuka.
Yeah.
Kairi Sane, Kairi Hojo, Kairi Sane. And now we've got Io Shirai.
Yeah. And Meiko Satomura came over for a cup of coffee.
Yeah, and Meiko Satomura as well. So there's 4 of the cornerstones of Joshi wrestling in Japan. Why are they here?
Money. I think that might have the most to do with it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. WWE is the place where you can get a pretty payday.
Yeah. Money and
let me look this up here. Let's see. Highest paid male. No, that's not the one. Highest paid female WWE as of 2018. Oh. Tied for 8th. Asuka, $250,000. So it ain't money. Really?
Well, keep in mind as well, there's also a little bit of a difference on the money factor on it, where highest paid females in this one, if you look at, say, Asuka's only making $250,000 a year, that doesn't look good for those ones. But then compare it to...
Well, you don't want to know who the other two are in that list that I said are tied for 8th. There's two other names.
Who are they?
You sure?
Sure, I'm sure.
Becky Lynch and Sasha Banks.
Still, even then, $250,000 for those performers sounds bad when you compare it to the men's wrestlers. $250,000 for those three is bad compared to Brock Lesnar at $5 million.
No, Brock Lesnar at 6.5 now.
Yeah, but compare the amount that they're making to, for example, top women's athletes, and you have the very highest paid WNBA performer is making $117,500.
Yep.
And the average WNBA performer is making about $80,000. So even the women on the low end of the WWE roster are making that much. Right. And then you go into the U.S. women's national team, and because women's soccer pays roughly, as the experts say, dick, even the NXT women are making as much as a U.S. women's national team performer. So you got to also consider that as well.
Right.
Yeah, the only real exception.
But I'm just throwing those numbers out there because somebody mentioned that Asuka came over here for money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but $250,000 is still a lot of good money compared to what you'd be making in Japan.
That may be true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would wager a guess when you consider just the financials of the actual companies, and this is not breaking down individual stars, but New Japan, which is undoubtedly the biggest money-drawing promotion in Japan, Joshi or otherwise, they had a record year last year, but their revenue for the entire year, and we're talking revenue, not profit, at the end of the year was only like $40 million. Mm-hmm. So when you take out, expenditures, paying the talent, WWE is clearing, over $100 million in profit.
That's just profit. Right. That's profits. That's not revenue.
Well, profit is what you make after revenue is subtracted from your expenses.
Right. You take gross revenue minus expenses, gives you net profit.
Right. So WWE's profits exceed New Japan's total revenue.
Right.
Which just goes to show you, in terms of cash flow, WWE could offer 10 times what New Japan could. And New Japan is the most, successful company in Japan. So any other company like a Stardom or Pro Wrestling Noah, whether it's Joshi, whether it's, Dragon Gate, whatever, they're going to come in under New Japan financially. So that gives you an idea of, the kind of money difference that we could be looking at here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not disputing that. Mm-hmm. But I'm just sitting there with, going, okay. Money.
It's all relative. It's all relative is the best answer there.
Right. There must be a damn good exchange rate for her right now. Because she could make more money. Kana Asuka can make more money doing computer graphics. Games. She's a gamer. She has a degree in computer programming. So,
as long as we're on the Economics 101 kick here, I can tell you there's a thing called opportunity cost, which is how much you're willing to give up for non-tangible benefits. And the quintessential example is, sure, I could make more money doing this occupation, but it wouldn't replace the fun and the love I have doing this other occupation.
Right.
Yeah. Plus, there's also the case that it's pretty clear that if Kana had stayed in Japan and didn't want to do that, she wouldn't be developing games on this one. She would have opened up a hairdressing salon. So that also has to be kept in mind as well.
Mm.
Back to the show. Back to the roster here. Why not? Let's get back.
Yeah, we kind of went off on a.
Don't worry about it. Whacked Out Wrestling's the ticking time bomb of Los Ingobernables, the podcast, for a reason. So. Mm-hmm. Yep, tangents are what we do here. So.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, the lower card for the SmackDown side. Again, a lot of people who are familiar to historians may not be as familiar to the rest of the wrestling fandom. On the face side, you have Road Warrior Hawk, who's basically waiting around for Animal to join him, Mae Young, Plum Mariko, Zbyszko brothers Stanislaus and Vladek, and I have a great story about Stanislaus that we get into later. On the heel side, you have Yokozuna, Gran Apache, Edward Carpentier, Jackie Fargo, Joss LeDuc, Ed Strangler Lewis, also managed by Billy Sandow as he was in life, and Stan the Man Stasiak. The Stanislaus Zbyszko story I'm going to tell. Stanislaus Zbyszko was one of the top wrestling attractions in Europe during the 1910s. And he had a chance to go all over Europe to apply his trade. And when World War I broke out, this was sort of a problem because he was from Poland. Poland was, if anything, on the Allies' side in World War I. And he would often do shows in Central Europe, which was the opposite side of the war. Well, he got arrested in Hungary because somebody who was going all around Europe and knew a bunch of languages had to be a spy. Zbyszko said, no, I am a wrestler. I just happen to be very smart. And I can prove it to you. And so the Hungarian judge at the time said, okay, we'll have you face one of our strongest soldiers. If you win, we'll believe that you're a wrestler and we'll let you go. If you lose, you're clearly a spy. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are, Stanislaus Zbyszko, successfully invoking trial by combat. You thought that was just a Game of Thrones thing. The story gets even better, though, because after a long match with the soldier, he manages to defeat him, proves his innocence, is given court costs of a few, whatever the unit was at the time. But he looks around and, the whole Hungarian army that's stationed there is watching him. They look pretty mad because he just beat their best guy. So he inadvertently invents one of the great tropes of wrestling, which is wrestler wins a large amount of money and throws it into the crowd.
Jesus.
I've never heard that before. That's awesome.
No, I've never either. That is great.
Oh man.
That's why the Zbyszko name is considered so legendary in wrestling, because Stanislaus was one of the great Eastern European wrestlers during the beginning of it. And for those who are wondering, no, Larry Zbyszko is not related. He took the name as a tribute. So, but yeah, I had to include Stanislaus and Vladek on the roster just because, of course, Stanislaus is badass enough to escape an espionage charge by beating somebody up for it.
That's approaching Danny Hodge levels of badassery, actually.
Yes.
Just throwing that out there for you Danny Hodge fans, who you may have some company in the upper echelon of manliness now. So.
Yeah. I don't think that trial by combat works on these ones, and I'm not sure that the trial by combat angle has ever worked in wrestling before, or since.
No, I don't think so either.
Unfortunately, they've legislated it out of context, which is just too bad, because, wouldn't anybody have loved to see O.J. Simpson settle his innocence with a duel to the death? Wouldn't that have just been great?
Yeah. But wrestling does have similar ones, like when Jerry Lawler had them write Billy Joe Travis's arrest into the show, so you had similar things to it on the opposite side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody in this group I do want to talk to the connoisseurs about. Edouard Carpentier, one of the better wrestlers of the 40s and 50s, great junior heavyweight out of Montreal. And very few people know this, but he was actually part of the reason that for the NWA-AWA split. Carpentier was the NWA's choice, I believe, to take the title from Luthez. But there was a group in the Midwest that wasn't in favor of that and wanted instead to pass it on to Vern Gagne.
It was Vern's promotion that wanted.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, it was Vern trying to politic. Get it right.
So, unfortunately, they reached an impasse. Gagne won the title from Carpentier. Nobody recognized it, except for Gagne and his friends, which is how the American Wrestling Association was born.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You'll find, by the way, for those who are new to wrestling history, you'll find that a lot of promotions started with, well, the NWA didn't want to recognize our champ, so fuck them.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly it. That's how bad the NWA had gotten at that point.
Yeah, but that was also the case where with NWA champions, you had to be seen as great because to be an NWA champion was different then because you had to have a whole group of different promoters, each of those promoters having their own horse in the race, and many of those times that horse in the race being themselves come to an agreement and say, yeah, this guy is the best of all of us and he should be the world champion.
But it wasn't.
You never get a title of, yeah, this person is best in the world like you would get with the NWA champ.
Okay, but there's some. It wasn't all of the promoters got together and did it. They had a board, a championship board, and it was just a handful. I think we're 8 of them, if I'm not mistaken. And Ric Flair talks about this, and you know, every promoter was politicking for their guy.
Yeah,
you know, and how Crockett was able to pull it off to get Ric Flair to belt was very simple. He would after Rick won the title, he would loan him out to other promotions for extended periods of time.
Yep.
That's why nobody can agree on how many titles Ric Flair has. The WWE is the closest we have to something official, but oh my gosh, there were so many confusing endings in his matches.
Yeah. I mean,
let's put it this way: he lost it 3 times in Puerto Rico, and they were never recognized.
Well, what's the biggest
that?
wrestling
I'm sorry?
company in the world right now?
What?
What's the biggest wrestling company in the world right now?
WWE.
How did WWE form?
It was part of the NWA.
Part of a title dispute.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to put the title on San Martino, and the NWA said no.
Yep. So there you go. I mean, it spun off the AWA that way, and spun off the WWF at the time, which is now WWE. And so
all these great champions got into this because of an NWA title dispute.
Same thing with
all the same.
Same thing with Georgia Championship Wrestling. New name WCW. That's where the big gold belt came from.
That was Mid-Atlantic, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bottom line, folks, if you ever want to see the history of the National Wrestling Alliance, like I said, it makes Congress look normal.
It does.
Nobody gets along with anyone. It's amazing that the thing survived as long as it did.
Well, and then the thing about it is too is that they were actual they were like a cartel, a mob, a mafia,
right?
And when Vincent Kennedy took over WWF, bought Capital Wrestling Corporation from his dad and made it Titan Sports. And Vince started going into other territories and doing shows or bringing his, sending tapes out to, getting syndication in other markets. There were contracts taken out on him.
Oh yeah,
they wanted him dead. They wanted him dead.
We've all heard Iron Sheik's story about how basically Gagne and everyone else said, "Hey, go in and take out Hulk Hogan from what he's done." That's nothing new. I'm trying to. There were stories of some, in some men's rooms somewhere, people were putting out hits on Vincent K. McMahon, and he just happened to have a loyalist who was using the restroom at the time, was trying very hard not to be noticed. I forget who was supposedly in the stall at the time, but it got nasty. Let's just put it that way.
Oh yeah, it did.
Yeah, and it wasn't just those ones. Like Jim Ross has said, he and Bill Watts went at driving with the goal of, we're gonna go kill Ted DiBiase and stuff like that.
Oh, that was McGirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leroy McGirt was the shooter in that one. Which is hilarious.
Leroy McGirt wanted to kill Ted DiBiase. And
Jim Ross
talked to Bill Watts, and he said, and the first question out of Bill Watts is about, is he drinking?
Well, yeah, he's awake, Bill.
He says, when he passes out, just come here. I'll get the gun away from him. Don't worry about it. And that's what they did.
Yeah.
I've heard that story several times. That is a classic story.
Yeah.
It just tells you how how loony it is. And like I said, if you want to hear that story, guys, and you have the W Network, I'm speaking to the listeners here, all 5 of them. Just look up the 2007 Hall of Fame. Jim Ross talks about it. You want to see the 2007 Hall of Fame induction anyway, because it just has such, it has the Wild Samoans going in talking about the stuff with High Chief Peter Maivia. It has, it has Bobby Heenan talking about stories with Nick Bockwinkel. It's Dusty Rhodes talking about whatever the hell he wants to talk about for half an hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just classic stuff all around.
Yeah. It was much easier to like the Hall of Fame inductions before they decided, wait a minute, you're all going on tangents on this one. You stay focused on what we want you to stay focused on.
Yeah.
Now, here's...
You brought on a couple of guys that are historians. I mean, there's 2 or more of us. Mm-hmm. So if you wanted all of Connoisseurs, there would have been a total of 4 of us.
Yeah.
And we all are very, very knowledgeable.
Yeah, a lot of people who appreciate wrestling history, we're going on tangents.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Whacked Out Wrestling's the show where we go on tangents. So,
would y'all like a little bit of breaking news tangent here?
Absolutely.
This has apparently come out of tonight's NWA show, and I've seen it starting to break on social.
Go for it.
This is actually not a spoiler of the actual show. This is an announcement made by the NWA. The Crockett Cup is returning. The tag team tournament from the 80s that Jim Crockett Promotions used to run apparently is coming back next year.
That's a pretty good move on it, because the NWA needs a tag team division, and so that would be pretty good.
Corrigan and company are doing it right.
Yeah, it's going to be a little interesting on this one, because they already got the title on Cody for their world title, and the only real tag team that matters in the indie scene is basically the Young Bucks. So it would be hard not to give them the NWA tag titles, but would you be able to keep them is also the question.
It's going to be interesting. There
are
a couple of other great teams that are coming up through the ranks. A team that I will always say needs to get a lot more publicity. The Carnies, Nick Iggy and Kerry Awful, do a lot of work out of Tennessee. They do some Nova Pro work, which is how I've come to know them. They're big in the Southeast. Really, Southeastern wrestling is an untapped market at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you remember the Elite. Now we're talking Bullet Club Elite.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's Cody and the Young Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Rumor has it they're leaving.
Yeah.
Rumor has it when their contracts are up, they're leaving. And guess where the rumor says they're going?
Right back to Vince.
Yeah. Cody's coming back to Vince, and the Young Bucks are coming with him.
Yeah. But honestly, it's always...
That'd be interesting, because Cody left. Cody left because he didn't think WWE viewed him as a main eventer, and he wanted to prove otherwise. Do you really think he'd be higher up on the card now than he was in 2014?
He will be.
Honestly, I don't know, because I think that the only way Cody's higher up on the card right now, Drew McIntyre also bet on himself similar times, and he came back in a higher level. But even then, I still kind of think that Cody's only going to get higher up on the cards if he makes it clear, I'm not signing this contract unless you give me a guaranteed world title reign.
Yeah, that might be in fact, that Cody might wind up going to Impact before he goes to WWE, because I think Impact would love to build around him.
Mm-hmm. Well, even then, I think it's still weird, because there's the chance that the NWA just says, okay, we're not going to run shows all the time, but we're going to get a cadre of top independent talents, and we're going to send them out to everybody in the world, and that's how we're going to keep the buzz of the NWA going. And if they did that, then the Elite would be a great choice to build around. So,
yeah, but Corrigan's not going to, because the thing about the NWA is that it was always a group of promoters. It was never one single guy. Now it's one. I think it's one or two people. It's Corrigan and someone else.
Dave Lagana, I think, is the head writer.
Mm-hmm.
And what he needs to do, what I said, and I've said this before, what might be the smart move is to reach out to NJPW, to reach out to some of the other independents here in the United States and say, hey, would you like to have the NWA world champion come and face your top guy?
Yeah, but even
that will get them more exposure.
Even then, it still seems like the big problem is that for a lot of the smaller ones, it's actually smarter not to put on your own shows than it is for it. And that's what I said when I said you get a stable of your NWA champions and you rent them out from promotion to promotion and book them everywhere and say, okay, they'll come in, fight your best guy, and so on. And likewise, you have stuff like Global Force Wrestling before they tried to take over TNA, which was basically, okay, we're just going to be the Funimation of pro wrestling. We're going to aggregate all the rights to the top shows of every promotion around the world, and we're going to put them on U.S. pay-per-view with a U.S. announce team and do it that way. And it worked for Wrestle Kingdom and got New Japan the start of a buzz, but didn't really work for the South African promotion they got.
Yeah.
It's going to be. I'm not quite sure where the NWA goes from here, but if Cody Rhodes is the one that they're going to ride with, I think they still have a chance to be something. I can tell you the suggestion of call the small time promotions and say we'll let your champion on there. I don't just work for Nova Pro. I work for and train with Crab Wrestling, and our champion Isaiah Frazier back in June got that match with Nick Aldis, and got it on a Nova Pro show, and it really, at the time, he was just a mid-carder with Nova Pro. He is really rocketing up in terms of popularity, a lot of it thanks to that match. So there is still value in the NWA name.
That's exactly it. There's value in that title showing up at your promotion, even for just one night.
Exactly.
Have them go, Biff, you're gonna have them Biff. This is things we've talked about. One of the things we miss the 2 out of 3 falls 1 hour time limit.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they split the first 2 falls, and the third one's a Broadway. I mean, everybody is our guy was that close. And always have their guy as the one doing the pin. As the time is winding down and the bell rings to stop the match, and he's like 1, 2, ding, 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 ding. He can't count 3. That's it. It's over.
Classic.
Everybody wins.
Yeah.
Everybody goes home happy.
Yeah. There's always a lot of ways to do it for these ones. Like I know before in the Bruce Tharp era, I know the promotion I was doing some work for was trying to become the Rhode Island NWA affiliate, and they just didn't have the money to get actual NWA title matches. One of the biggest regrets on this one, as well as the regret they closed down before I could convince them to name a show, Straight Outta Little Compton.
Oh my!
So that's how the NWA would work. Now is you send out their guy. You send out their champions, but you don't want it to be a faction, so to speak.
Yeah. The only thing the faction is good for is making sure that the little guy doesn't get any ideas about pulling a fast one.
Well, it's not so. When I say faction, I'm not saying like the Bullet Club specifically as faction, or like the Four Horsemen as faction. I'm saying a faction like, okay, Corgan gets the booking rights to Cody Rhodes, a top women's wrestler, a top tag team, maybe 2 or 3 other people in those divisions, and then they send out, okay, I'm the exclusive booker to these people. If you want them for your promotion show, you book with us, and I'll get them to your show, and stuff like that.
Well, that's pretty much how it has to be if you're hosting someone else's title match. You have to, you can do that, but at the end of the day, the promotion that holds the gold calls the shot.
Exactly.
That's just known.
Yeah. But the thing about it is that Corrigan and his people would have to agree. And the thing about it is, let's say for instance, and I'm using this as a hypothetical, Duke, let's say Cody comes down to Nova Pro. Okay, takes on the guy you say is rocketing up the card right now.
Yeah, Isaiah Frazier.
Okay, so you have a world title match, Isaiah Frazier versus Cody Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Frazier wins the match. What's Cody going to do? Isaiah is now part of NWA. Cody has to stay where? Nova Pro? He ain't going to like that.
No, it's not so much that you stay in Nova Pro. It's basically just like, for instance, you're thinking of it like with the undisputed title and the brand split on it, where you lose the title to someone who's now in the NWA, then suddenly on it, the new NWA person is in the cadre of NWA exclusively books it, and they can say, you want Isaiah Frazier for, say, Beyond Wrestling, you have to book him through Corgan, or stuff like that.
Yeah, I think more to the point, if Frazier had won, it would just be a quick double change. I think Cody would get the title back very fast in another promotion. That's another trick that they used a lot back in the NWA days. It's how Kerry Von Erich is a world champion. They did basically a double switch to give him the title.
Yeah. They gave him the title in Texas, and 2 weeks later, I think he took it back in St. Louis. Rick did, or something like that.
In Japan, yeah, they had a tour of Japan, and Ric Flair won it back from him. So
because Kerry was not ready.
Yeah. But even then, there's a difference between Kerry Von Erich losing it back to Ric Flair in Japan, but he still won the title, and say Jack Veneno being the NWA World Champion, because that Ric Flair feared for his life. He actually beat this guy, so he said, "Yeah, let him hold the title, and we'll just go from there." But then we'll never mention it.
Yeah.
And Flair talked about that when he was inducting Roddy Piper, about how the Flair-Menino match, which was technically a time limit draw because Flair's arm fell the third time just after the bell, caused martial law to be declared. As he put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were several of that time limit draws that the referee screwed up and counted 3, and the fans would actually riot if their guy didn't win it. So because all they would hear is he counted 3, but they didn't hear. They see that, and that's what they hear, but they don't want to understand that the bell rang.
Exactly. So now that we've been over the SmackDown type roster, one last thing, you would love with Lance Russell and his lordship Alfred Hayes on the commentary table here to call some very good action. The main story right now, Buddy Rogers is the champ, and he's sort of in a rivalry with Lou Thesz over that one. But the big rivalry came off of the August main show, where Piper was challenging Buddy Rogers, and the Sheik attacked when the referee was down. So now Piper once again gets his hands on the original Sheik. And as I mentioned before, there's nothing that's going to keep these two from tearing each other apart. Like, nothing whatsoever.
No.
This is the kind of match that fantasy booking was made for.
This calls for a dog collar match to keep them
No,
together.
not a dog collar match. You want to really make it something? Make it an Indian strap match with a cage.
Yeah, this is, or like suspend Gary Hart from the ceiling or something. I mean, there's just no way that you can.
No, see, Gary Hart. I don't believe Gary Hart ever managed the original Sheik. The only one I ever saw him with was Eddie Creechman.
Yeah, I understand, but we're sort of. It's more improv than anything else. I know Gary Hart did Abdullah the Butcher, and Abdullah took a lot of influence from the Sheik. So
like Stan Stasiak and Woman were probably never really connected to each other, but Stan Stasiak could probably work well like the meat to Woman's PMS in this group. So that's why it clicks there.
Yeah, sometimes we sort of improvise matchups like. Perea Atomica is managed by Captain Lou over on the face side. So, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Where you got Bobby in all this?
Bobby Heenan is on the Raw roster, and that's a good example to try and get back on the rails to go into the Raw roster. And this is closer to my stuff for it. And on the main event scene for it, you have a mixture of your face side. You have Giant Baba, Dusty Rhodes, the hero of the division right now, and Rikidozan. And on the heel side, you have Randy Savage, managed by Elizabeth, and the crown jewel of the Heenan family, Nick Bockwinkel, and his bodyguard, Andre the Giant.
Interesting.
Now, there, my friends, is an angle that would have drawn tons of money. Nick Bockwinkel is the cowardly heel champion hiding behind Andre and Heenan, with Dusty Rhodes trying to chase him. Just think about that one for a second and realize how many stadiums you could have sold out with it.
Well, you forget one thing. Both of you do. Mm-hmm. And Biff, you know where I'm going with this.
Go ahead. I know. Go ahead.
Going back to AWA times, boys. Mm-hmm. Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens were managed by Bobby Heenan.
That's why we
late 60s and early 70s.
That's why Heenan's the leader of the family on it. And that's why it works on this one, where you can absolutely have a shot at Nick Bockwinkel for the title. You just have to go through Andre the Giant first. Spoiler, good luck.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the face and heel splits here, and we've got Andre the Giant and Randy Savage and Nick Bockwinkel on the top side. And then I'm looking at some of the best opponents for Andre are also on the heel side. Like you got Ernie Ladd here on the heel side. Now, Andre and Ernie Ladd, that would be a match I would pay to see.
Yeah, but that was one of the problems where Ernie Ladd was also just a classic heel, and Andre the Giant was also a very classic face, but it's basically built, if you keep in mind that this is building to eventually Andre the Giant turning on Nick Bockwinkel, and then you go with, you're going to need a whole new eternity, because every person in heaven and hell is going to go to that show to see Andre finally get his hands on Bockwinkel.
That would have been
with Heenan suspended in a cage.
Yes.
Yes, there's where you put the miniature in a cage.
There you go.
You put the weasel in the cage.
Yeah. And then you have was there anyone you wanted to talk about on the main event scene on Raw, Duke, specifically?
I mean, there's 6 names that everybody who follows wrestling should be familiar with. I don't think really there's any surprise in that group. Maybe the idea that Nick Bockwinkel is currently holding the title, but when you explain the story behind it, it's just greatness. So
yeah.
And don't forget, Nick Bockwinkel was one of those guys that could use the 10,000 or the $1 million words and piss you off.
Yeah, and if you somehow don't know who Nick Bockwinkel was, if you know Chris Jericho's run as Serious Jericho from the late 90s, 2000s, he will perfectly admit to you. He'll be the first to admit he stole everything from Bockwinkel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just imagine the promo duel with Bockwinkel and Dusty. Brother, I may not have the vocabulary that you love to show off, but this ain't no debate club, brother. We going in there, and we going to have a fight for that gold.
And Madison Square Garden just sold out.
Yep.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I ever saw a Dusty Rhodes Nick Bockwinkel match.
No.
I don't think they ever wrestled. If they did, it was never televised. So
it was pretty hard, because Dusty Rhodes only really worked in the AWA early in his career when he was part of the Texas Hangmen for it.
No. What do you mean?
Texas Outlaws. Yeah.
Texas Outlaws. Get it right, boy. Get it right.
Yeah. And by that time, Dusty would have never been in Bockwinkel's league. So by the time Dusty finally became a star in the NWA, he and Bockwinkel probably had a champion versus champion match, but most champion versus champion matches ended up in draws or time limit things anyway, so neither champion had to lose. So
yeah.
One of the dirty secrets that wrestling has, if two if two different promotions are putting their champions against each other, something crazy, that it results in a result.
Mhm.
But everybody kind of figures that.
Yeah, but
Let's
that's
finish up a mid card for a sec, Tommy, because I like the disparity here. I like the variety.
well, going into the upper mid card, you had Blue Demon, the senior one. You had Bobo Brazil, Eddie Guerrero, Pat O'Connor, and Argentina Roca. And you also had Eddie Guerrero with Los Gringos Locos in the mid card there. And on the heel side of it, you had Bruiser Brody, Gorgeous George, Kurt Hennig, Ernie Ladd with the Grand Wizard, Rick Rude, and Ray Stevens with Bobby Heenan as another Heenan family member. So you have a lot of different mixtures there as well.
I would love, I've seen it before. I'd love to see it again. That's Bobo and Ernie.
Yep.
Yep.
That would be a very good match for it. Bobo Brazil was a great baby face. Ernie Ladd was a great heel. They were like two sides of the same coin for each other.
Yep.
And we discussed this on our Black History Month show, how much Ernie Ladd innovated in wrestling that a lot of people didn't know about. The idea of the eternal injury, using the Asiatic spike that Terry Gordy later took on, and also the famous "I'm out of here" finish.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he just would walk away.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, something that Ric Flair used all the time.
Yeah.
He'd walk away and take the 10 count.
Yeah. And if you're a whack,
and let's face it, if you're going against Andre the Giant, the safest thing you can do is walk away and take the 10 count.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and if you're a whacked out wrestling listener who doesn't go with it, look on Shootin' DeBreeze's Black History Month episode, aka one of the few examples to show that I actually may know my stuff. So
yeah,
isn't that what the Sunday shows are about?
I think it was episode 20.
God, it was so early on. All I know, it was this past February.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
we'll look that up.
Yeah, and it was. I took a risk.
Yeah.
With it, Yeah, and I said it before, and I'll say again. You had three white dudes talking about Black history in wrestling, and we did it right.
Yeah.
Everybody that I spoke to that listened to it that is of color said, "You guys did it perfectly."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's an honor.
Yeah.
And we didn't even scratch the surface.
I know, right? There were people. I've heard people come up after and say, "Hey, you forgot these guys."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about this person? We're like, oh shit.
Yeah. And that's really what you'd have from a Bobo Brazil versus Ernie Ladd match. You had the best black baby face of the time and the greatest black heel ever.
But where's Sailor Art Thomas?
What number?
Oh man, so many names we're gonna. Let me tell you, scouting's gonna have a lot of fun when we're done with this.
I got you a tag team match right here. Here we go. Let's put Bobo Brazil and Bearcat Wright, and Bobo is kind of sticking up for Bearcat against Ernie Ladd and Sputnik Monroe. Now you want to talk about some history?
Wow,
that is
good.
Wow.
Yeah, there's you a tag.
Oh man. You know how many TV shows you can main event with that one, Tommy?
Yeah.
Biff, you just sold out Wembley with that one.
Yeah.
Well, I was looking at this and I was thinking I wanted a huge tag match, and I was leaning towards Art Barr and Eddie Guerrero against Kurt Hennig and Rick Rude. But we were talking about
a tag feud as well on it and it would be a question mark because you have the Robbinsdale crew, especially if Tom Zenk managed to turn heel like we discussed in NXT, and you have a third person, and then you have the choice of for instance, that 6-man, Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, and Tom Zenk versus Eddie Guerrero, Art Barr, and the Madonna's boyfriend, Louis Spicolli. And it has to be done that one because you can't exactly have the singer as the boyfriend of Louis Spicolli in this world. So you have to go with the Virgin Mary as boyfriend. So,
which is exactly the kind of exaggeration that Eddie Guerrero would have gotten a kick out of.
Yes.
Yep. No, talk more about that Bearcat Wright and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You got me salivating, Biff.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
This is why we wanted the two. This is why I'm glad that Tommy's able to get the two of you on board, because, you know, if anybody could come up with ideas for this roster, you two could.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've got Giant Baba on this roster. You've got Ricky Dozan. You know, I'm looking down here, way down the card, with Big Van Vader sitting there, imagining what Vader could have done with Baba in his prime. Looking at Haystack's Calhoun and Vader. You talk about a battle of the beef.
Yeah. And that goes into the mid-card level, where you have the face side would have Art Barr, Haystack's Calhoun, Davey Boy Smith, Shinya Hashimoto, who in this one is being sold as Rikidozan's protege, to keep in mind there, Jim Neidhart, Owen Hart, Brian Pillman, Arnold Skolland, The Ultimate Warrior, and on the heel side you've got The Bruiser and The Crusher, Eddie and Jerry Graham, Ivan Koloff, Killer Kowalski, Gorilla Monsoon, another one of Heenan's boys, Blackjack Mulligan, Sherry Martel, Jimmy Snuka, Sputnik Monroe, Jamal, and Big Van Vader. And you may wonder why Jamal is being sold as this and not Umaga, and the answer is I could use some more tag teams, and this way I can use 3-minute warning instead.
I just look at this mid-card, and the first thing that pops into my mind is, you know, can you imagine how much torture Heenan would go through if the Hart Foundation set their sights on him?
Mm-hmm.
Just imagining Owen Hart and Hart taking on the Graham brothers is intriguing.
Yes.
Of course, Owen against Ray Stevens would have brought the freaking house down.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
That's what you call a sleeper match. One of those matches you throw together on the card, and you don't promote it much. These two are going to wrestle just because.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because they want to be on the card. It's just get them on the card match.
Yeah.
And they go out for 20 minutes and completely tear the house down. And they go back to the back and say, "All right, assholes, follow that."
Yeah. That one. You could probably even beyond that one, you could have some big ones for turns on it. Like the most obvious one from people who aren't in the Heenan family would be Eddie and Jerry Graham making the Bruiser and the Crusher turn due to their time with Bobby Heenan and AWA. So, and you could imagine that being a very good face team to add some powerhouses to the side.
Well, you call in the Bruiser and the Crusher heels.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is that what they were for most of their tenure?
Maybe they were. Let's put it this way: in Chicago, they were over like faces.
Yeah.
And they did heelish things, but they were faces. They took on the black hat. They were white hats. They weren't black hats. They were white hats.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to remember that in case we want to set
they went after Stevens and Bockwinkel for the title several times.
Mm-hmm.
They took on Ivan Koloff, and Bruiser took on Ivan Koloff single. Crusher took on Ivan Koloff.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, Crusher made Scrap Iron Kadaski in Minnesota.
Yeah, and that's really good plus on it because of the heels on the mid card side. I do think that you could do Bruiser and Crusher as faces or heels, and they could be equally viable, both as the badass, dominant power guys that you just have beat the Foundation or Los Gringos Locos, or as the heroic badass and beer drinking, dancing the polka with fat women faces.
Not
the fat women dancing the polka with the dollies. Get it right.
Here you go.
Bruiser and Crusher could be the APA of this brand.
Yeah,
might be the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Here's an idea for you. Book a 6-man tag match. If you want to turn Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher babyface, book a 6-man tag with Jim Neidhart, Owen Hart, and Davey Boy Smith, taking on Dick the Bruiser, the Crusher, and Blackjack Mulligan. And have the end of the match come with, I know asking Dick the Bruiser or the Crusher to take a pinfall here is almost anathema, but have the heel side lose, and then Mulligan beat up Crusher and Bruiser with his new protege, Dr. Death Steve Williams.
That would absolutely work very well.
That would.
Or if it fails, when
Crusher versus Mulligan and Williams
finally meets his mortal coil on this one, trying to get a trade for Terry Gordy is the teammate for Steve Williams, and both of them is Mulligan's sidekicks. So,
oof.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't know whether Gordy would rather be in the Freebirds or the Miracle Violence connection when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and that's really a good thing because Gordy was a pretty underrated tag team specialist. It's like why I say that Billy Gunn was one of the most underrated guys of all time, where anyone can be in one good tag team. It takes one of the best to be in two good tag teams.
Another thing I like about this, about looking up and down this mid-card here, I am just imagining, you talk, the art of the sprint is really lost in today's wrestling environment. Very few people are able to put together an intense 5 to 7 minute match that can, draw the plaudits the way that a longer match could. But I guarantee you that if anybody could go out there, go full blast, and get the plaudits on them, I'm looking at a pairing like Killer Kowalski versus Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah.
Just have them jump the bell, have them go crazy for that short amount of time. That they leave something memorable behind.
Yeah. And Kowalski would
go ahead.
And Kowalski would work on that one, but there's also the chance that the fans turn even him face, even if he has a name like Killer, because come on, of the people on the heel side, he's a vegan nerd who doesn't own a TV. Who could think of that guy being a heel for 2 years?
In this day and age, your damn Skippy Killer Kowalski would be a face.
Yeah.
The vegan nerd, that's it. There's his character.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he made it work.
By the way, I'm going to say this right now. I did sort of a trial run of this with a sort of Champions Carnival idea with Boss Rock and with Reverend Claire back in the day. One of the favorite matches that I wrote was doing Owen Hart against Eddie Guerrero.
Oh, yeah.
Put those two in the ring together and tell them they're having a comedy match. Then just sit back.
Yes.
I mean, there are so many. I wasn't privy to a copy of the lists. Okay, so that kind of, so I'm kind of hamstrung here.
Basically, it was made private, but we need your email address so that Duke can make it fully.
No, that's all right. That's all right. You didn't pass that information along to me, or I would have given it to you had you asked.
Yeah.
But that's all right. No
problem.
Big deal. I mean, everybody since Connoisseurs of Wrestling did their draft, everybody's been doing one.
Yeah. That's kind of what it boils down to.
Yeah.
We started it.
Plus, yeah. You guys started it, but you didn't have the fail on this one. I have to give Metal Matt his problems that you didn't make the Iconics the first round pick. So,
God,
you and your Iconics.
Hey, if that's what it's right there, someone has to get on you for that.
Dead wrestlers, because I don't think anybody else would have the kind of morbid sensation that we would to look past, to be able to envision some of these matchups. They might get too depressed thinking about it.
The Iconics, to me, are on Miz level of despising.
Yeah.
And we all know how much I despise Miz.
Let's take a look at that lower card, Tommy, because I'm looking at it. There's some names I think would really might have some upward mobility in it.
Okay, then. Your lower card, on the face side, you'd have Cora Combs, who adds that one, and at the very least would be a regular feud with Sherry Martel on the heel side. You have the Fabulous Kangaroos, Al Costello and Roy Heffernan, Liz Marks Sr., and the Madonna's boyfriend, Lou Spicoli. And then on the heel side, you have the Moondogs, King, Spike, and Spot, Johnny Valentine, Dr. Death Steve Williams, and Rosie as Jamal's partner.
Wow.
it wouldn't be a great technical match, but if we're just talking about two of the all-time personalities, Louis Spicolli and Johnny Valentine would be a great match to book.
Yeah.
Just by virtue of their history backstage in the business.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Johnny Valentine is someone else we should talk more about because to many people, he's just Greg Valentine's dad. To someone like me, he's not just Greg Valentine's dad, but he's also lost his career in the infamous Ric Flair plane crash.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you've seen him, if you've seen more about him, let's add to it.
I have seen Johnny Valentine wrestle.
Johnny Valentine was better than Greg.
Let's
put that out there right now.
Greg, I'm sorry, and I loved the Hammer. I loved him as a heel. He was great, but Greg can't hold his father's jock when it comes to being in ring.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Johnny. I saw him. Like I said, I saw him wrestle in Chicago. Everybody wrestled for Vern in Chicago. Or wrestled in Chicago, and Bob Luce was the promoter. Everybody wrestled for Luce in Chicago in the 60s and 70s. And Johnny Valentine, they had Johnny Valentine, and they created another character, his brother Jerry Valentine. There was two of them. They weren't really brothers, but they worked together. And you want to see there's some matches out there. I don't know if you can find them or not, but the Valentine brothers could bleed as good, if not better, than Ric Flair.
Mm-hmm.
We all know how good Ric Flair could bleed.
Yes.
Johnny bled even worse.
Mm-hmm. You think about some of the great bleeders of our time, not just Ric Flair, but you look at someone like a Shawn Michaels, or Great Muta has what everyone considers the mother of all bleeding moments. But
hell, Abdullah the Butcher was a great bleeder. Look at his head.
Oh God.
Yeah.
If you ever see his head, if you see the lumps in his head, that's not. He wasn't born that way. That's what happens when you do too much razor work.
Yeah. Yeah, but you could absolutely buy the Valentines being great bleeders because it's just a common thing. Like the Great Muta or Abdullah the Butcher would be exceptions that prove the rule that, by and large, blonde guys are great bleeders for the most part. Because you'll always have that image of the blood staining their blonde hair red, and that always leads to a better blade job.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know who's an underrated bleeder? Steve Corino.
Again,
there you go. Yeah.
Again, another blonde guy for that theory. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when that final battle a few years ago when he and BJ Whitmer were finally going to settle their feud. I remember a lot of the people in the Daily saying, "Oh my gosh, Carino's breaking out the white tights." Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I could tell you, going back to your, your mid card where you got the Bruiser and the Crusher. I know Blackjack Lanza is still alive, so bear with me here.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the match in Chicago at the Soldier Field on tape, where it was the Bruiser and the Crusher taking on Blackjack's Lanza and Mulligan with Bobby Heenan. With special guest referee of Jersey Joe Walcott. Heenan was wearing white that night.
Yeah.
That should set off alarm bells.
And got himself locked in the cage. Go figure. With two men that wanted to kill him. The Crusher.
Yeah, 2 men out of a list of approximately 500.
Right. Yeah. And he got his that night. From the boys. And I got some breaking news for you guys as well.
Okay.
The city of South Milwaukee just this past week, has approved monies to be spent to erect a statue of one of their most famous residents from the city of South Milwaukee. You know who that is?
The Crusher?
Duck Crusher. That's right. Reginald the Crusher Lasowski. They're going to erect a statue in his honor.
Well, of course you have to. I mean, he's the man who made Milwaukee famous. So
right.
Got him.
Are they going to put a 6-pack in his hand? That's the big.
I don't think so. But the funny thing about it is that my wife, Legends lover, her dad used to drink. They went to school together, and they used to drink together.
Mm-hmm.
You've heard those stories, Biff.
Oh yeah, I've heard the stories. Yeah.
Well, this first way, the Crusher would have to notify the police what bar he was going to be in because there was always a fight.
Well, he's still prepping the ground, so
yeah, he would have them ready. You know, the cops would get there, he'd be throwing them out of the bar.
But let's just pause right here. This just popped into my mind here. This just popped in my mind. We've got on the Raw roster, we've got Andre the Giant, we've got Dusty Rhodes, we've got Bruiser and Crusher, we've got Blackjack Mulligan, we've got Arnold Skaaland. I don't want to know the beer tab for a night on the show.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
Andre alone counts for half of it. So
yeah,
Andre alone counts for 3/4 of it.
He's freaking the whole roster under the table.
Good Lord!
But you've also got to understand that this is the afterlife we're talking about. This is like what you're going to see, where the beer tabs are the best beers in the world, and you don't get hungover for it. Can you imagine how much they would drink in that case?
So basically, Jesus of Nazareth is standing over in the corner, turning water into wine. It's like, I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah.
That's a good one, Biff.
You've got Jesus of Nazareth turning water into wine, and you've got Louis Spicoli and Art Barr saying, dude, I have these sugar pills. Can you turn them into somas for me?
That's just wrong on so many levels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your next month's show should change a venue without air conditioning. So we're heading south of the border.
We're already going to hell. Let's enjoy the ride.
Yes.
The highway to hell.
Well,
Bon Scott can be there and can be a guest celebrity. So
yeah. Plus, the Hell, I have it on good authority, Hell also gets the Afterlife Wrestling Federation combined with 24-hour reruns of current WWE Raw.
Ooh.
Why you want to do that? Why you want to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is hell. I mean,
yeah, true.
The real thing is, no. Hell actually has alternate universe programming of Monday Nitro if Vince Russo was still in charge 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God, please, no.
And on that note, I think my time on the show is done. So,
well, let me ask you. You look at the whole roster, Biff. You think it would be? You think we did a good enough job dividing the rosters and all that?
Mm-hmm.
Just the sheer, it's the one thing that comes to mind when you're looking at this roster, and I'm looking across the board at all three brands, is diversity. You have a little bit of every major style that you could want. You know, I see the influence from Lucha Libre. I see Japanese talent. I see some people from the territory era. The guys that you would consider, you know, like the big 90s stars, your Owen Harts, your Eddie Guerreros. I see the people that, you know, were box office, you know, when box office mattered. Big Daddy Crabtree and Andre. You got the workhorses, Nick Bockwinkel, Randy Savage. I could make hay with this roster.
Yeah.
Now, I can't guarantee you that I wouldn't book, like, the Moondogs against Ultimate Warrior and Al Costello just to torture some people.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe have a Haystacks Calhoun versus Ivan Koloff Iron Man match.
Yeah.
But, you know, I could make this roster work, I think, if I were in charge of it.
Yeah, and there's actually not that many rosters that you can say weren't used on it. The only thing you can say that wasn't really experienced was the 2000s era, because not that many people from the 2000s era passed on for it. The only big indie name who really has met their maker so far is Trent Acid, and the only big names from the 2000s who did since Eddie's death would be Jamal and Lance King. So,
yeah, don't forget and Rosie.
Well, yeah,
Rosie passed too. So
yeah. So we got him. Warning and Lance Cade as big names from there. Yeah. And then for indie names, just Trent Acid and Larry Sweeney. So
You know, they're
That's sort of the brilliance of this, is that it's a nice way to look into the past, and a nice way to remember some of these great names. And there's just so many that, you know, people don't appreciate right now. Like, those who watch Lucha Underground, that mask logo they have, that is the design that Blue Demon made famous. And Blue Demon is probably the second biggest name in Mexican wrestling history behind El Santo, I would say.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was also
Del Santo. Yep.
Had the fact that they had Blue Demon Jr. in this company to really help make it and get off the ground and have people say, "Oh yeah, this is true Lucha Libre."
Yeah, they had El Hijo de Blue Demon down there in the first season, and it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Or first couple of seasons he was there. You know, his old tired ass. But he still could go, which is funny. You look at we talk about old tired asses. You look at down at CMLL, for instance. The guy who just had his 40th anniversary there.
Yeah, the Blue Panther.
No, not Panther. Negro Casas.
Yeah.
Oh, him too. Yeah. No, I mentioned that because Blue Panther's 40th anniversary was celebrated on the last episode of Super Viernes. But you're right. Negro Casas is the king of crazy old man lucha wrestlers right now.
Yeah.
He's the king. He's the king of CMLL because he's been there the longest of anybody.
Yeah, and he's still probably one of the best wrestlers in the world today, even at that age. So.
Yeah. And he's a heel, and yet you listen to the crowd in Friday nights, they love him.
Well, that's also because
that's part of it.
It's not like
are just styles. They're not instructions to the crowd.
Yeah, they don't say that. They're in Mexico. It's common to have Technico fans and Rudo fans on it, and no one has a problem. And it's the weakness where America saw that and thought, okay, we'll be the heel section crowd, and then that's just, no, you're just being douchebags who cheer the heels. You're not real Rudo section guys.
Yeah, and that's you know, and then you got the Technicos who go out and spend the 20 pesos for the beer just to throw on Roosh.
Yes.
Hey, that's money well spent as far as I'm concerned.
Because we've all seen it.
Mm-hmm.
He coming down the ramp, he gets beer thrown at him. I mean,
yeah,
that man.
Some Super Viernes, by the way. I think you'll want to check that out, guys, because the main event is the trios matchup: El Terrible, Rush, and Barbario Cavernario against Caristico, the original Sin Cara, Dave Finley III, the Fit Finley's son, and Penta El Ceramiedo.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's this past Friday?
Mm-hmm.
That was just this past Friday, yeah.
I'm going to have to go watch it now.
Mm-hmm.
Damn you.
It should be up on Claro's YouTube channel by now, I hope.
It should be. It usually is. Hell, they do the Monday and Tuesday show live on YouTube. But no.
So, Biff, thank you so much for showing up. TM, I've still got power in me. If you want to stick around, we can discuss some of the stories that Tommy and I had come up with.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Yeah, let's stick around.
You're always welcome to give us suggestions on how to go forward with these shows. I don't know. You think the Blog of Doom we can get a kick out of this?
Oh, goodness. You talk about a controversial little thing. I'm sure that'll go over very, very well.
Yeah.
Biff, you're good at that broken shit. So.
Yeah. And it's always a good one because Whacked Out Wrestling always has a place for you guys when there's ways for it. So, and it usually works on the Sunday show because this is the show where I show that yes, I do know what I'm talking about, as opposed to Thursday show, which can be the more whacked out show.
Well, I appreciate the invitation to come on here today. It was really fun. I did not realize until tonight that Duke and Andy PG were the same person. I was like, it's such a small world. You know, that my world has just been blown. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Biff.
Was that from that other website that was nasty?
Well, I'm known as Duke over on Cage Side Seats, and as Andy PG over on Scott Keith's Blog of Doom. I've got a few identities. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. So you going every which way. So.
Yep. All right, Biff. I'll talk to you soon. I'll keep in touch. I'll try and include just as I've got your email here, so I'll include like reports on the TV shows for this thing if you ever want to stop by and talk about it. TM, if you're going to stick around, great, because we'll be talking about where we stand right now in terms of the storylines in both Raw and SmackDown side. And
are we going to talk about? Is Crown Jewel going to be discussed?
No.
I was going to say please, because I had a very good day yesterday. I don't know if you guys listened to it, but I made my point very clear.
Oh, don't worry. We are fully on the screw Saudi Arabia thing. So
yeah, my whole thing is the hashtag principles over profits.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree.
And honestly, that's just one where there's no real easy answer there. So I just try to
There
go.
isn't really.
Mm-hmm.
But I listened to an interview today with JBL on Busted Open Radio.
Mm-hmm.
He's supporting WWE and going over there.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
you said, it's weird because, again, we have proof that the Saudi Arabian government is an evil empire, but we also have proof that WWE can conclusively be said to have done some positive things there by going. Like the big one where they made the mistake from the commercial about showing women at the show, and people were happy, and the Saudi government was furious. But within a week, they not only said, okay, we're pulling our problem from that, but they allowed women to fight sports. So there is a little bit of proof that, yes, there's a positive thing going, but there's a lot more proof that the Saudi government is still a problem there.
Yeah.
I think the best way to put it is that if the Jamal Khashoggi incident hadn't happened, I'd feel a lot better about it, because you could say, well, they're opening up a closed regime to the Western world and to other options, but right now it's just a wrong time.
Yeah, and that's really the problem, because there's too many problems, and I put this on Cage Side Seats and Answers, where the only way you're going to stop the Saudi government is if you're willing to die to stop them, and it's basically you either have to give up petroleum for good, and in this world, if you give up petroleum and anything that uses it, that's pretty much saying I plan to commit suicide to stop the Saudis, or you have to be willing to join the military and fight the Saudi government and be willing to go to war and die for it. So
the only winning move is not to play. So
yeah.
All right. So when
So
it comes to discussing some of the ideas, some of the stories already to abuse TakersMinion and make him realize just how crazy we are, I'll let you decide, TM. Would you rather hear Tommy's stories or my stories first? His brand or my brand?
oh, let's see. I'll go with Tommy's.
okay,
All right. So we're going to start over on
okay. Well, the biggest
Stoney
storyline.
and Bobby the Brain on commentary talking about their top stories. But in this case, we'll let Tommy do it. So go ahead.
Well, the biggest story on this one has to be the fact that Bobby Heenan's the head of the Heenan family, and he's got Nick Bockwinkel as the champion. He's got Andre the Giant as the champion's enforcer. He's got Ray Stevens and Gorilla Monsoon as mid-card stars on it. He's got the Graham brothers as stars on the lower card. And basically the big problem is that Nick Bockwinkel may or may not be able to be beaten by the top faces in the company, but the big issue is you want to face Bockwinkel, you have to get past Andre the Giant. And there's not many people who can get past him. Even Giant Baba can't really pick that lock. And it's worse because you pick the lock that's Andre the Giant, you're going to be able to beat Bockwinkel.
Yeah, that is interesting, but I just can't see Andre being an enforcer.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And that's really the big problem.
Because I got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're on your roster, and on this roster you guys have together, overall, this promotion, I should say. Do you have a 30-day rule?
Honestly, I'd assume it's the 30-day rule, but for the most part, you've got Bobby Heenan, who has some power as well, and
Yeah,
you have
but the ultimate 30, the ultimate power lies with the promoter, I guess you could say.
yeah.
That's one thing I've not noticed
Well, that's really the
for
problem.
Whacked Out Wrestling's Memorial, the Afterlife or whatever you call it, Afterlife Wrestling Federation.
Mm-hmm. Well, the big problem is that the commissioner of Raw is Jack on the Tape Tunney, so he's not gonna give you a fair shake either way.
Yeah, as it turns out, here the big show, the Raw exclusive show coming in October, there's nobody for Bockwinkel to take on, but Heenan is assuring us, he's found someone. He's going to bring Bockwinkel a good fight. Yeah, I think we all know what to believe about that.
Yeah. As I said, there's just some voids that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, most of the show though is built on Bockwinkel being the cowardly heel and champion, and Bobby Heenan giving him a regular army of jobbers to feed on.
That is the thing, though.
Mm-hmm.
Bockwinkel was never a cowardly heel.
Mm-hmm.
Bockwinkel would take you on head on.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine in this case it would be, well, I'd love to face you, but there's a pecking order here, and my manager has said that if anybody can't get past Andre, they're not good enough to face me.
Right. That way, it's not making him the cowardly heel.
Yeah. And that makes a lot more sense, but it basically is the case where Bockwinkel's not trying to duck people as much as it is that Heenan's made the order. You want Bockwinkel, you go through Andre first.
Right.
And really, that's the whole story on it, where everything on Raw is basically building to Andre turns on Bockwinkel, and every soul that has ever existed in all of human history is in that stadium when Giant finally takes on Bockwinkel.
You could actually parlay that into a future storyline turning Nick Bockwinkel babyface.
Yeah.
After the Andre program, have Bockwinkel hold resentment over Bobby for what he felt was orchestrating his downfall, and kind of making a slow burn turn, babyface turn for him.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of options going forward here with the Heenan family. And even if bear in mind, even if Heenan were to lose his top two guys, he's still got Ray Stevens, he's still got the Graham brothers. Hennig and Rue would probably jump in if he asked him to. He's going to be able to regroup.
Mm-hmm.
Remember one thing about Nick Bockwinkel.
Mm-hmm.
He took on Kurt Hennig, and they went what? I think it was a 45-minute match, and everybody was telling Kurt Hennig, let Nick listen to Nick.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't listen.
Mm-hmm.
Bockwinkel blew him up in 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll do that to you. So he's a shooter too.
Mm-hmm. What's going to be your big story? Who is the TV champ at this point? Pat O'Connor programmed with, do you think, Tommy?
Yeah.
Who you got going forward for him? Because I've seen O'Connor. I've seen tapes of him from some of the old WGN shows. I love this guy, and he could probably work with just about anybody on the heel side of the upper mid card. In any style, and he would adapt to the style that the opponent had.
Mm-hmm.
So
honestly,
who you got him with?
Well, with Pat O'Connor, I think that he'd probably be someone who'd probably work with a lot of the mid-carders on it, because Hennig and Rude would both be good matches for O'Connor. Bruiser Brody would be a huge battle for him as someone who the O'Connor couldn't really see on that one. Even Gorgeous George could be a good sports entertainment versus true wrestler match, and could give you a little bit of the Razor Ramon versus Goldust feud there. So
you kind of so is he doing sort of the open challenge thing on every show? Is that how it's going?
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. TM, I expect you to be salivating right now. Pat O'Connor every week with a 15-minute time limit.
Mm-hmm.
How awesome would that be?
Mm-hmm.
I would be
Oh,
in favor of it.
He's AFK right now. My apologies. Biff, you're still here.
Yeah, I would be in favor of it. That would, yeah, I could settle into that quite nicely as a fan.
Yeah. And if he's in a 15-minute open challenge on this one, that also helps because O'Connor was more of a scientific wrestler, and most of the heel side is pretty much a lot of brawlers and people who wouldn't seem to click with O'Connor. But if you look at that face side, you have Eddie Guerrero, Blue Demon, Argentina Roca, Davey Boy Smith, Owen Hart, Brian Pillman. A lot of guys who probably put on good matches with O'Connor as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And think of some of the famous matches that Pat O'Connor and Buddy Rogers had.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
That would be another big one to consider.
If we ever the shakeup coming after the big show with them, you could move O'Connor over to SmackDown side and have him challenge Rogers and just let them go for a long time.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I could see that being a possible trade on this one because Junkyard Dog for Pat O'Connor could be a good one because Duke will agree that I value more characters than actual wrestlers in my fantasy booking, so that would also have to be used as well.
Yeah, especially looking at the people JYD would be going against right now.
Mm-hmm.
The Gotch family doesn't have a fit on that side, really. But you move him to the other side, and you got him going against someone like a Gorgeous George or Blackjack Mulligan or any of the Heenan family. Bobby Heenan's promos on JYD would just be epic.
Yeah, and even past that, Dusty Rhodes and Junkyard Dog is the tag team you never knew you badly wanted.
Oh man!
Wow.
Well, there's two sides of the same coin for you.
Yep.
Michael Hayes somewhere just involuntarily shuddered over thinking of that time. He's still pissed off that they stole his payoff in the Superdome a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Oh man. I've been sort of throwing this. The next show, like I said, is an October show. It is Tommy's brand exclusively. He gave me a preliminary card, so I'm just looking over it right now. The main event for that one, of course, is Dusty trying to get past Andre the Giant to get to Bockwinkel. And I just have a funny feeling that, with the team concept of November coming up, that match might involve a few moments of interference.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that you'd probably end up with Dusty Rhodes and probably something like the Hart Foundation up against Andre the Giant, Nick Bockwinkel, and the Graham Brothers. But I'm not sure if there's this little idea Dusty might have that might make that a little bit bigger.
We're going to need a bigger ring. We're going to need a bigger building.
Someone called Matthew Broderick.
Yep.
Yes. Beautiful reference there. Other matches that he has, TV title on the line. O'Connor eventually goes against Gorgeous George at this one. Very much a contrast in styles there.
Okay, quick question on that.
Yes.
Does Gorgeous George have his butler?
Is Gorgeous George's butler? I didn't know which butler he had, or if his butler was deceased. So
his butler. If Gorgeous George is deceased, his butler is deceased.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine he's probably deceased.
Yeah. Yeah,
mean,
I know that his wife was 96 years old in 2010 and had lived long enough to take his induction into the Hall of Fame. So.
Yeah, but Gorgeous George is. I'm sure his butler is deceased. So that's why I'm asking: does he have his butler? He was the first one to have like that. Have something like that.
Yeah, I'd assume he would, but we didn't know who he was at the time. But he absolutely would in this case. So.
No, I don't know who the butler was either. So, but let me look this
James
up
Dudley
real
is
quick.
running around. We can always put him in a tuxedo and make him the butler.
Yep. Well, I think Bobo Brazil is still a face, so you'd have Bobo Brazil managed by James Dudley, so that probably wouldn't work as well.
What you would want to do is take Gorgeous George and have one of the lower card babyfaces be the Butler, and then have eventually build to the Butler turning babyface. Like maybe that's how you bring up a Louis Spicoli and have him be like the clumsy Butler that George constantly berates, and then you have a Virgil Ted DiBiase turn.
Wait! I know exactly who. I know someone who might make a good Butler for him. I just realized we forgot to put on the roster somewhere. Chavo Guerrero Sr.
Very good.
That could be a very interesting pairing, actually.
I could see George bullying him around until the guy gets tired of it.
Well, I don't think it works because Chavo Guerrero was the face in Los Angeles, for one. And for another, you have Eddie Guerrero there, so you don't have that. So you have someone who'd be able to give him you're Chavo Guerrero Sr. You should be his Butler.
Well, hey, Eddie versus George is a future feud. That might be something we could start it on.
I would say
Eddie the Roddy Piper of this whole routine.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly how you would do it. Is Eddie get involved.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything on the Butler what the name was. I looked, scanned through his career, and I was like, okay, nothing. Shit.
Well, there's your answer to that one. So,
but yeah, like I said, he was the first wrestler to ever have that. And that was back in the 30s. So,
always that's why we wanted you all on, because you guys, for all the ideas we have, you could top them. So,
well, not top them so much as that I find flaws.
Yeah,
I see.
Taker finds flaws. I'm just sitting here fantasy booking what I would pay to see. I would try to, financially, creatively, my promotion would be just aces. Financially, I'd be in the ground in 6 months. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you're saying, Biff, is that you're like Paul E.
I'm the Exxon Valdez of fantasy wrestling. So.
You can book the shit out of a promotion, but you can't run one.
Yeah, we'll go with that. My financial savvy is not quite up to snuff.
You're Paul Heyman. You're Paul Heyman.
I make Paul Heyman look like Jim Crockett. Oh Lord.
Too much fun. Well, no, I find flaws. I've even picked some of this booking apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, asshole.
Where it's those 2 points of it where you have things where knowing it's the Afterlife Wrestling Federation works on problems on it. Like, for instance, for Afterlife purposes, on the one hand, you have Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr as a tag team and Los Gringos Locos as a star one. But on the other hand, you know that the Afterlife would be built on the juicer.
Yeah.
Well, hey, it's the Afterlife, so we don't have to worry about drawing gates.
Yeah.
Well, this is a no cancellation zone.
There you go.
Every seat is front row.
There you go. Except down in the hell territory where we're trying to compete with who's the boss who runs. So
I mean, it's like Terry Funk says, every seat is front row, every show is sold out, but it's BYOB.
Yep.
Oh, we could, going to. I don't know. I would feel like I said, I would flip flop a lot of the faces and heels. And just the alignments just don't feel right to me.
Yeah.
You having the Bruiser and the Crusher as heels, it just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
I think that's where you and I may differ, Taker, because of our age group, because you got to see them firsthand, so you're kind of basing off of what you experienced, whereas I'm looking at this more from now what could you do if they were heels kind of deal.
Well, it's basically weird on this one because the Bruiser and the Crusher were faces for a lot of that time, but they were also Heenan managed, so you also have that option that they could be easy Heenan family.
No, Crusher was Heenan managed. Or, excuse me, Bruiser was Heenan managed.
Yeah.
But then there's another thing you don't know about. Heenan left the promotion in Indianapolis because Bruiser was he was shorting people.
Wow.
He would take $5 or $10 out of each check, out of each envelope to keep. And he would take the pay the rest and tell them we didn't make as much as we thought. And he was pocketing $5 to $10 off of the guys. He didn't caught on to it and he left. So there was actual heat between those two.
Well, I would say then, looking at the roster, Bruiser and Crusher might be the people that are most ripe for a turn on the Raw side. So nothing wrong with that.
You could probably make some good hay having Brian Pillman turn on Owen Hart.
Yeah.
Sweet baby Jesus, give me Owen Hart and Brian Pillman matches till the end of time. It's like Star Trek Trooper 3. God is real, and he's on your side, and he wants you to win.
Are we talking loose cannon Brian Pillman?
No. I want Hollywood Blonde era Brian Pillman versus 1988 version Owen Hart.
Okay.
I want Owen Hart before his knee injury and Brian Pillman before his ankle injury.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. You just felt the vapors kind of creep up there, didn't you?
That would be the junior heavyweight match of all junior heavyweight matches.
Well, another good match would be take the same one, Brian Pillman, the same one you're talking about, and put him against Eddie again. They tore the house down on WCW several times.
Oh yeah.
You could do a double turn. You could have Davey Boy Smith and Brian Pillman go heel, and have Eddie and Art Barr take on Davey Boy from about 1985-86, and Owen Hart or Brian Pillman from his Hollywood Blonde days. That would be another great one.
Yeah, there's just so much possibility going forward. I mean, the whole thing is we wanted to start by having a strong Hart foundation just as a base that we could work off of in the mid-card.
There's a couple of names you guys left off, too.
Okay.
That would fit either mid-card to upper mid-card. I would look at them as a gatekeeper tag team.
Who would they be?
Who is it?
Paul and Maurice, the Vachon brothers.
Oh my God! I mean, Mad Dog is all brand. So, and we put him with Luna and Vivian. We might throw Paul in there as well. Just make that a whole.
I tell you what
not forget Maurice.
I tell you what y'all could do. After the show is over, you get Taker a copy of the roster as it exists, and then let him try and piece together his competition brand.
Yeah.
off
of what's left over, because I'm sure he's got plenty of AWA and Midwestern guys that he can pull from.
Yeah.
Oh, I know quite a few.
We might throw him.
You know, I know Pedro. I know Pepper Gomez. I know a Pepper Gomez.
Pepper Gomez is on the NXT brand, so.
Yeah, but I'm saying Pepper Gomez was, you know, the cast iron stomach.
Yeah.
Oh yes, we talked about that angle.
I think we got Pepper Gomez fantasy booked against Chris Adams from World Class. So.
Okay, ooh, that sounds good. Is this? Did you talk about the actual Volkswagen being driven on his stomach?
Oh wow, I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, go ahead and share.
It's on YouTube. It's out there. All you do is you type in Pepper Gomez car, and it'll come up. That you see the front of a. They put it on a ramp, and they push it up over him, and the car sits on his stomach, and then he bounces the car with his stomach. He thrusts his hips up and was able to move the car up and down.
Oh jeez, that's awesome.
The ultimate
on the NXT or I guess leftovers brand, the developmental brand, which I think you would just go nuts with. We had discussed the possible main event 6-man feud of Dick Slater, Dick Murdoch, and Adrian Adonis against Bam Bam, Mike Awesome, and Chris Candido.
Ooh, that sounds decent.
Yep.
But you forgot one thing. You forgot something. You forgot another great heel tag team.
Which one?
Well, one of them's still alive, though.
That's maybe why.
Yeah, the East-West connection.
Adrian Adonis is in NXT.
Ventura?
Adrian Adonis and Jesse Ventura.
Mm-hmm.
We're known as the
When
East-West
Ventura
connection.
passes on, we're going to have a place for him somewhere on this main roster, whether it's as a wrestler, as a commentator, we're not sure.
Yeah.
Well, Taker, you can put your tag team division around the Fabulous Kangaroos.
Now, mind you,
I'm a little surprised they're as low as they are on Tommy's card, but that's the way it is right now. Like I said, look, trust me, TM, we will find a way to get this entire thing to you so that you can just, help us out to your heart's content.
Yeah, but you want to hear a real funny thing?
Mm-hmm.
When we did our fantasy draft on Connoisseurs, Legends Lover said, I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything about this.
Lied.
She basically kicked all of our asses.
Lied through her teeth.
She basically kicked all of our asses that night.
She had everybody bitching and moaning within the first 2 rounds. So.
Well, I threw a major curveball at you guys.
Yeah.
With my first pick.
Well, just looking at this, because I have access to the Afterlife Wrestling Federation entire roster. I'm just looking at all of these. I know for a fact that you would have a field day working with them on the SmackDown roster, just with Mad Dog down there and Billy Robinson. And then you would have a field day with the Raw roster with all of Bobby Heenan's talent that they've got. But then we might never see TakersMinion again. This might be the end of it. He may get so deep into this that he just disappears. So
you guys,
it's gonna be like a TV guys, attach a rope to him.
Yeah, guys, if you check the Hangouts chat that we're on, my email's there.
Okay.
All right, let me just dig that up. Then I will. There it is. I see it. I will. I'll pass this on when we're done. So
okay, yeah. I can, I'll put together what I think are good matches. But the thing about it is, all I would ever tell, if I ever fantasy booked a match, all I would tell him is, okay, so and so, you win. This is how much time you have. Go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's what a lot of that's what a lot of us would do. Is we wouldn't exactly need angles. We just say, go out there and have a good match.
Yeah, go out there and have a good match. If you want to start an angle, let me know what the basics are, and I'll flush it out for you. But promos, they cut their own promos. We're not scripting shit.
Right.
As long as they keep the language clean, it's great.
Ooh, here's a match for you on the Raw side: Shinya Hashimoto and Big Van Vader. Let's get it.
Ooh.
And that's a mid-card match. Yeah, that's how loaded this roster is.
Yeah, but you need your mid-card talent.
Yeah, but that would also work because you have Vader attacks Hashimoto, injures him, and now Rikido Zan swears revenge.
There you go. So
it's just it can go, it can go on and on and on.
Yep, and I'll tell you, I don't know whether Tom can provide me notes for the Raw side, but I will, when I send you the roster, provide notes as to what the picture on SmackDown looks like right now, so you get kind of an idea of where to start.
Fair enough.
I thought you were talking about what the basic thing of the pay-per-view I had for the Raw side would have been. So.
Oh yeah, I already mentioned, of course, Andre and Dusty. I mentioned O'Connor defending against Gorgeous George. He's got a tag team turmoil to determine who faces the Grams next, with the Moondogs, Kangaroos, Gringos Locos, Bruiser and Crusher, and 2 Hart Foundation teams. Of course, he's running Bobo Brazil against Ernie Ladd, because you'd have to be crazy not to run Bobo Brazil against Ernie Ladd.
Yep. Because one of the I remember this and Biff, I think this was done in the Crockett area or down in Florida. I can't remember which, but Ernie Ladd actually called Bobo Brazil and Uncle Tom on television.
It might have even been in the Mid-South territory. So, it might have been in the Mid-South territory, one of the two, Florida.
Nah, because I remember he called him an Uncle Tom on television.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to start a blood feud.
Yeah. That promo is the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the tag belt's on the line with the Graham brothers taking on the thrown together team of Blue Demon and Argentina Roca. You have.
I could see Roca and the Demon winning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That would be crazy.
But the thing about it is Roca was someone who loved the dropkick and was barefoot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
the matches I've seen with him.
I see him. I saw him. I saw pictures of him in magazines when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Drop kicking people at the top of their, right at in their forehead with his bottom foot.
Yeah.
From a standing position. He did.
Well, of course he would. I mean, he was good friends with Superman, so of course he had to be able to fly. So.
Now,
Kayfabe, what's kayfabe?
Mm-hmm.
There's also a special attraction tag match: Ricky Dozan and Shinya Hashimoto against the Robbinsdale Connection. That's just a great upper mid card tag match right there.
Right. I mean, you've got so much available. Too much, we can go on for days and days and days.
Yeah. I know.
I mean, that's what we were doing in our draft. Is that as the draft was going on, we'd start Biff or George or myself. We'd throw a match out there from our group.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all I'm going to say is any promotion that's got Gene Kiniski as a job guy has too much talent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really how big this one is, because there was that much talent before a deceased promotion. So
now I got a question, you guys, and this is something we came up with later on ours. And Biff, I think you know where we're going with this. Everybody that was not picked from your pool of talent, and I'm sure there's several of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're free agents.
Basically,
yes, they are.
Like I said,
and you can pull. You can pull from that free agent pool.
Yeah,
bring them to your promotion, and yes, they could. That's a special one thing, and they could even take the title off of your champion. But then the guy who had the title has to leave.
Mm-hmm.
If we wanted to go that way, we could. I can tell you right now, between the Raw, the SmackDown, and then the NXT side,
what I might do is I might take the scraps that are left and create my own promotion and come after all of you.
Oh, you're going to Billy Corgan it. Okay.
Yeah, because you've got to realize how many
names I can think of. Like you said, Sailor Art Thomas is out there. Buzz Sawyer is out there. Dino Bravo is out there. There are very few names left after the
Hernandez is out. As far as I know, Hercules Hernandez is out there.
Yep.
Yep, he's out there.
Yeah, basically we did it by starting with, we ranked everybody who was deceased on a list from 1 to 10. 1 would be the people who were basically trainees, low-level guys that you probably never heard of, maybe some fans on this one. Slowly went up, and if they got to at least a 6, they were even in contention for NXT. And everybody who got to about a 7 was on 7 or higher, got into the main roster.
Yeah.
But then again, there are a lot of names we didn't know. So who knows how this is going to go down.
Maybe Biff and I should sit down with the leftovers and build a promotion that comes after you guys.
Do it. Do it. We love it.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. Judging by the talent that is on the Afterlife Wrestling Federation roster, you're definitely going to be in outlaw territory. But hey, I've seen stranger things happen. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. We all need our feeder systems. We all need our Ring of Honors and PWGs. So do your worst, man. Do your worst.
We'll be creating your Combat Zone Wrestling CL's NWA here. So no offense to CZW fans or anything. That's just comparison here.
Yeah, I mean, we would just have way too much fun with it, Biff. You know that.
Yep.
Imagine all four of us from Connoisseurs getting together with this list of leftovers and creating a promotion and just booking it crazy.
It would be fun for the first 5 minutes, and then all the people we want that have already been taken just piss us off, and
Yeah.
We just rage quit. It's like, but I want to put it
because we knew just enough to get a good list of the real top guys on it, and there's still some talent that we didn't get, but not a lot.
Nah.
What you'd have to do is you would have to buy some of their talent from them. Like maybe buy like they didn't you have a Mike Von Erich that you're a Fritz Von Erich that you could peel off. But might buy Wahoo McDaniel and Bruiser Brody from them or something. For George's sake. George would love Bruiser.
Oh yeah. George is a Bruiser Brody mark for the day as much a Bruiser Brody mark as the day is long.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of those 10-minute specials, Bruiser Brody and Ultimate Warrior just throwing haymakers at each other.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. and of course, rolling into the crowd for the double count out because that's a Bruiser specialty.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So
that is one thing I've always been fascinated with, especially it happens in Japan. Like I was watching a Japan match with Hogan and Abdullah. Like after about 8 minutes, they're in the 5th row and they're like just grabbing every chair they could find. They're grabbing anything that's not nailed down. I was half expecting them to start throwing fans at each other.
Yeah.
That's something we talked about on Connoisseurs when we talked about Abdullah. And Bruiser Brody for that matter. Actually, Bruiser Brody. The crowd brawl.
Mm-hmm.
Bruiser Brody was the innovator of that. That's where the Falls Count Anywhere matches come from, was actually Brody starting matches out in the stance.
they lose some of their impact today because of how overused they were in the 90s and early 2000s.
Yeah.
But still, even today, even like when you had Jeff Hardy and Randy Orton on SmackDown a couple of weeks ago, when they would get out in the crowd, it can still be a really big high spot of a match just to see people go out in the crowd because it is so different than ordinary wrestling. So
the one thing they overdo is the triple threats and the fatal four ways.
Oh Lord, yeah, they've been overdoing those for a decade and more now. So
yeah,
they're not special anymore.
Mm-mm.
Okay, and we have some more updates as we go through to keep going with the updates of things on this one. And our argument about the NWA podcast is officially obsolete. Nick Aldis is the champion again.
Oh wow!
Nick Aldis, what?
Nick Aldis won
Nick Aldis beat Cody and is now the NWA World Champion again.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I also saw earlier they instituted a mid-card title, the NWA National title, and your first NWA National Champion is Willie Mack.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great choice, by the way.
Interesting.
Yeah. I thought they actually gave Sam Shaw the title on that, which would have made Joey the Caveman happy, but at the same time, that
I think Willie Mack beat Sam Shaw in the final is what happened.
Well, and let's see, didn't the women's national NWA belt get defended tonight too?
Right, that's what Aldis just won. So
no,
the women's belt, yeah. Jazz was defending against Penelope Ford. I don't know what happened there.
Mm-hmm.
People forget about that one. You know, it's interesting to say the least. But I knew, you know, yeah. Cody booked himself at All In to win it.
Mm-hmm.
That was I called it. I said he was going to win it, and people were like, "No." I said it's stupid to book yourself to win it, but that's what he's going to do. Plus, he wanted to have he wanted to hold the belt that his father held.
Right.
Yeah. And really, what's more of a traditional thing than a Rhodes booking himself to win the title?
The Dusty finish.
Something's never changed.
Mm-hmm.
The Dusty special.
Yeah, the Dusty special.
People were actually upset that All In didn't end in the Dusty finish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they kind of had that with when Jericho showed up.
Mm-hmm.
That's true, yeah.
Dressed up as Pentagon.
Yeah.
That was what, the Omega match, I think?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Anyway. I need to get going here because I got to get up in the morning. I got to go to work.
Okay.
All right. It's been great having both of you on. It's been
This is
check your
probably
email
a
to
good
TM.
time
I'll
to-
send you the roster and snapshot, and you will you'll be drooling. So
until next time, this is Whacked Out Wrestling, which it may have had some different tangents, but that's what Whacked Out Wrestling does. Until next time, I'm Thomas S.K. Greene. With me was Andrew McHale and Biff Kensington. Thank you, and see you next time.
hey, don't forget TakersMinion. He was here too.
Yeah, and TakersMinion was here, but he basically left, so.
All right, guys.
And as always,
We'll be back to your regular insanity on Thursday. This was special insanity.
Yep. We remind you to watch the Connoisseurs of Wrestling as well as Shooting the Breeze. And what other podcasts would you like to advertise, Biff?
Grounds for Development. Greg the Hold's special coverage of NXT and 205 Live. If you want to catch up on everything NXT and 205 Live, Greg the Hold, a.k.a. the Saskatchewan Spinning Nerve Hold from Cage Side Seats, he's got you covered. That drops Thursday mornings. And Two Guys One Sport with Crazy Chris and George Otsavis. Got to give them some love, too.
Yeah.
On Thursday evenings.
Mm-hmm. I was about to mention that. I'd also like to call out Squared Circle Sound Off with my man Sean Neutron O'Brien as a good look into the current wrestling scene. And he has a lot of people from our promotion at Nova Pro on, so got to give it some love.
Yep.
Yeah. You can't forget Metal Matt and Ruthless Aggression podcast either.
Yep. Yep, they came on a couple weeks ago for our live watch of the Global Warning Tour, and they do great work as well.
All right.
Yeah, that's the if we ever do a Sunday night live watch, you guys are welcome to stop by. So
yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, thank you so much for all the dozens of listeners out there. My name is Andrew McHale. You can see me at Nova Pro Wrestling if you're lucky.
Yep. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.